Hogwarts, The Return of Turmoil. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126 Sweet's Talent. In just 10 minutes, Gryffindor is leading 60-10. It's hard to imagine what the Gryffindor players have been through. I thought they had 3 first-year players and would be much weaker. But if we underestimate these 3 first-year substitutes, Slytherin will probably pay the price. Slytherin can't touch these 3 first-year players at all, because Gryffindor has 2 evil beaters. That's right. They are the brothers James and Albus. They don't seem to be hitting the bludgers, but controlling the bludgers in their hands. Yes, you heard it right, James and Albus are actually controlling the restless bludgers. James and Albus, the 2 school celebrities, have once again become the focus of the game. When Maureen rose, everyone focused on Maureen, but seemed to have forgotten that the Potter brothers of Gryffindor are also amazing people. The 4 of you go ahead and attack, and Albus and I will take care of those crooked people. I'll teach anyone who dares not to be blind a lesson. James commanded. This time, there was no poker's command, but all the players seemed to have a common goal, as if they had memorized the tactics Poker had formulated. The storm formation with James and Albus as the main players was surprisingly smooth. Slytherin was completely stunned. Normally, they would not have been so far behind Gryffindor, not to mention that Poker and Folio were absent today. But it seemed that it was precisely because Poker was not there that every player in Gryffindor was eager to win the game in front of Poker's parents and not embarrass Poker. Everyone had already stimulated their potential. With James and Albus leading the way, Slytherin's formation was completely disrupted. They could not break through the joint defense of James and Albus. Gryffindor quickly pulled the score directly to 150 hours and 20 minutes, leading by more than 100 points. But James and Albus's control of the bludgers came at a price. The bludgers themselves were restless and had their own consciousness. Controlling them meant spending more energy. James and Albus' energy was gradually failing to keep up, and their speed began to slow down. Maureen, go find the snitch and end the game. James shouted. He knew that his and Albus's explosive power was limited. If they ran out of energy and hadn't finished the game, Slytherin would start to counterattack, and the situation would be reversed. Maureen no longer deliberately assisted Gryffindor in attacking. He was looking for the snitch everywhere in the field. The swift eagle made his figure become a phantom, but even so, he would rush over from time to time to help his teammates intercept Slytherin's attack. When James missed a bludger, Gryffindor's formation finally had a gap. Scorpius quickly seized this opportunity, rushed up to break the quaffle, and turned to rush towards the goal. But Sweet rushed over from the side and blocked Scorpius's way. Scorpius had to rush down and bypass Sweet. However, Sweet's flying skills were surprisingly good. He seemed to have anticipated Scorpius' route long ago. His speed was faster than Scorpius's and he intercepted Scorpius again. I won't let you pass. Sweet's tone was very stiff and indifferent. He said it and did it. No matter how Scorpius attacked, he would always be blocked by Sweet. All the audience noticed Sweet. Scorpius' flying skills were recognized as being among the top 10 players in the school, but Sweet, who had never shown his flying skills in the game, actually stopped Scorpius steadily, which shocked everyone. Many people turned their attention to Sweet. Is there another genius hidden in Gryffindor? Oh my god. Scorpius was forced away by Sweet in all 5 of his attacks. Sweet is also a freshman in Gryffindor. This is his first time to compete. Everyone focuses on other people, but no one expected that Gryffindor actually has such a great flying skill. Is this contestant wearing Muggle sunglasses also an overlooked dark horse? This time, even Hugo couldn't help but marvel. Although he knew that Sweet's flying skills were not bad, otherwise he would not have become a substitute player for Gryffindor. Sweet rarely showed his flying skills in front of other people except for training, so basically no one in the school knew this person. But they didn't expect that Sweet would start to fill in when James and Albus began to run out of energy. All Gryffindor students have cheered again, constantly cheering for their team. Scorpius also realized the threat of Sweet. He didn't expect that there was such a person in Gryffindor. Sweet seemed to be very familiar with his flying direction and was always able to block his way at the right time, making it impossible to get rid of him. Jeffrey. Scorpius had no choice but to pass the quaffle back to Jeffrey. Jeffrey caught the ball and rushed towards the goal while James and Albus were dealing with the bludger. But Sweet appeared in front of Jeffrey again like a ghost. "I won't let you pass." Sweet's tone was still stiff. Jeffrey encountered the same dilemma with Scorpius again. He tried to break in again and again, but couldn't find a chance to shoot. Sweet's flying skills simply surprised them. "Get out of my way!" Jeffrey yelled angrily. This time he didn't try to bypass Sweet, but rushed towards Sweet. He wanted to knock Sweet off the flying broom. But Jeffrey miscalculated again. Sweet's flexibility was beyond his imagination. He didn't hit Sweet's broom. Sweet found a tricky angle to avoid Jeffrey's collision. With a kick, he kicked the quaffle off Jeffrey's hand. Swish! Sweet caught the quaffle with his ghostly movements and started to counterattack. His dodging and stealing were perfect, and the audience cheered again. Is this really something a first-year player can do? Sweet's flying skills don't look like a first-year student at all. He is a veteran who has been playing on the court for many years. He successfully fooled Slytherin's Jeffrey and stole the opponent's quaffle. The whole action was smooth and perfect. Hugo explained loudly. Sweet had already rushed out with the ball, and at this time, Maureen just flew over his head. He just said indifferently, "Throw it." The quaffle was thrown from Sweet's hand to Maureen. Maureen was paying attention to the changes on the court the whole time. When Sweet stole the quaffle, he had already flown up and appeared in front of the quaffle's flight path at the perfect time. The latest novel is published on the 69th book bar. Bang! Maureen used the tail of the broom of the Windhawk to sweep the quaffle fiercely, changing the direction of the quaffle. The quaffle whizzed in the air and passed through the goal. Goal! The whole audience burst into warm cheers again. Maureen and Sweet looked at each other and then their figures were separated. Others didn't know, but only Maureen and Sweet knew that when he and Sweet were training, the cooperation between the two was also quite perfect, but they just didn't have the opportunity to show it on the court. "Be careful, they will divert their attention to you," Maureen said as he flew past Sweet. "Take care of yourself." Sweet responded as usual. Maureen was used to it, and he continued to search for the golden snitch. His worry soon became a reality, because Jeffrey chased after Sweet madly this time, even ignoring the quaffle, and chased after Sweet, trying to knock Sweet off. James and Albus had already rushed over to help Sweet, but at this moment, Maureen had already found a golden flash under the Slytherin goal, which was the shadow of the golden snitch. Chapter 127 The Final Collision. Without hesitation, Maureen turned and rushed towards the snitch. His sudden U-turn also attracted everyone's attention. Soon everyone found the snitch flashing near the Slytherin goal, and everyone exclaimed. This exclamation also attracted the attention of the Slytherin seeker, but he was a beat slower than Maureen and his speed was far less than Maureen. The Gryffindor seeker saw the snitch. Yes, he is very fast and is rushing towards the snitch. The Slytherin seeker was left far behind, but it's not good. All the Slytherin players gathered over, and the goalkeeper was going to hit Maureen, trying to use a foul to interfere with the Gryffindor seeker. Hugo shouted. He was right. Maureen found that the Slytherin goalkeeper and two beaters had appeared in front of him. The two Slytherin beaters were suppressed by James and Albus throughout the game and had no room to play. This time they seemed to understand their role and actually swung their bats, ready to stop Maureen with the bats. One of the Slytherin beaters had already swung his bat at Maureen's head. Everyone in the audience gasped. If this bat hit him, Maureen would definitely fall off the flying broom. At this time, he was at least 20 meters above the ground. Too much? Slytherin's action is too despicable. The bat is used to hit the bludgers. You can use the bat to control the bludgers to hit people's heads. That's your ability, but you use the bat to hit people's heads directly. That's your shamelessness. Hugo felt that he could no longer comment on the game fairly, and he shouted angrily. But Maureen once again showed everyone what Gryffindor's most promising new star is. He leaned over the broom, turned half a circle, and kicked the bat that came over. The bat in the Slytherin beater's hand was unstable, and it hit his forehead, and the bat hit him hard in the face. The batsman covered his face and screamed. Blood spurted out of his nose, leaving a trail of blood in the air. He had been thrown away by Maureen, but there was still the Slytherin keeper and another batsman in front of him. The two of them blocked Maureen's way fiercely, and the bat and fists were thrown at Maureen. Maureen had to go around, but when he went around, the Slytherin seeker had already flown past him and rushed towards the golden snitch. Maureen calmed down, he adjusted the broom to an angle again, dodged the fist of the Slytherin keeper and the bat of the batsman, and passed between the two. The two Slytherin players only focused on attacking Maureen, but they were unable to dodge in time. The Slytherin keeper was hit in the mouth by his own bat. The keeper also screamed, and blood and broken teeth spurted out of his mouth. Maureen passed the two Slytherins who had done what they had done, and chased after the Slytherin seeker. He soon caught up with the seeker, and his swift thought helped a lot, being much faster than the other player. However, Scorpius had already rushed in front of Maureen. He did not use despicable means to block Maureen like other players did, but rushed to the snitch, intending to catch the snitch for his seeker and end the game. At the critical moment, an uninvited guest appeared nearby. Sweet, who had been chased by Slytherin Geoffrey, appeared next to Scorpius and bumped into him. Scorpius was shocked. He did not expect Sweet to use such a foul method. The whole audience stared at them. The whole collision process happened in a flash. It seemed that Scorpius was about to be hit by Sweet, but Sweet once again surprised everyone. He did not hit Scorpius at all, but swung his broom up in time and flew away from Scorpius. But behind Sweet was a crazy Slytherin chaser, Geoffrey. Geoffrey wanted to hit Sweet for revenge, but when Sweet flew up, Geoffrey didn't catch up in time. He directly hit Scorpius, who was going to catch the snitch for his own seeker. The two of them collided with each other and rolled out. Scorpius roared unwillingly. He was only 10 centimeters away from the snitch. However, Sweet, who used Geoffrey to interfere with Scorpius catching the snitch, was not feeling well either, because he used this dangerous move to stop Scorpius, but made himself hit the Slytherin ball column. The broom was tripped by the ball column, and the whole person flew out from a height of more than 20 meters and broke away from the flying broom. Not good. Gryffindor Sweet used his superb flying skills to make two Slytherin players collide with each other, but he also hit the goal post. At this height, if he falls, the consequences will be disastrous. In order to prevent Slytherin from catching the golden snitch, Sweet made a very dangerous but not foul move, but this move also made him pay a price. Not only Hugo, but everyone watched all this with worry. For the golden snitch, the Slytherin and Gryffindor players fought each other in just a few seconds. Slytherin wanted to intercept Maureen by despicable means, but they were all resolved by Maureen and Sweet. But at this time, Sweet had already fallen to the ground. He didn't have a flying broom and had no way to save himself. Everyone was worried about Sweet. However, Maureen passed between the two people who collided with Geoffrey and Scorpius, and dived towards Sweet quickly. His diving speed was so fast that it was incredible, and he came to Sweet in an instant. Sweet's sunglasses flew out in the air. Maureen was suddenly stunned because he vaguely saw that under the sunlight, Sweet's eyes seemed to emit a strange red light, but this red light was fleeting, and Sweet had already closed his eyes. Maureen didn't think much. He grabbed Sweet's hand, and the huge impact made both of them fall to the ground involuntarily, but Maureen tried his best to control his broom. Before falling to the ground, he finally straightened the flying broom and flew rapidly along the ground for a while. He let go of his hand, and Sweet fell to the ground from half a meter away. Maureen also stopped steadily beside Sweet. "What are you doing? Your mission should be to catch the golden snitch, not to meddle in my business," Sweet said indifferently. His eyes were not open, but still tightly closed. Maureen looked around and found the sunglasses that Sweet had dropped. He stuffed the sunglasses into Sweet's hands and then smiled. Saving people and catching the golden snitch are not contradictory. The latest novels are first published on the 6th book bar. He spread out his left hand, and the golden snitch flashed the light of victory in his hand. With a long whistle, Madam Hooch blew the whistle to end the game. Gryffindor wins. Madam Hooch announced the final result. Chapter 128. After the game. 320 hours, and 20 minutes. Slytherin suffered the biggest defeat in history. The whole stadium was boiling, and every Gryffindor student roared. This game was of great significance to Gryffindor. Everyone thought that Gryffindor, which was missing 3 main players, would be beaten by Slytherin, but unexpectedly, all the Gryffindor players were inspired. Whether it was James and Albus, who amazed the audience with their control of the bludgers, or Sweet, who emerged as a dark horse and overwhelmed Scorpius and Geoffrey, or Maureen, who scored the most goals and caught the golden snitch, they all brought everyone a wonderful game with blood boiling. Gryffindor! 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 All Gryffindor students were cheering, and the Gryffindor lion that was transformed by magic above the audience was also roaring loudly, pushing the atmosphere to a climax. 320 hours, and 20 minutes. This huge score difference was probably something that all Slytherin students did not expect. In the absence of Poke and Philia, Gryffindor created a miracle. Many Gryffindor students rushed to the Quidditch field, surrounded Maureen and the others, and regarded them as heroes. The golden snitch in Maureen's hand looked particularly bright under the sunlight. To be honest, this tactic can't be used for at least a month. James had thrown away the bat a long time ago. His hands were shaking slightly, but the joy on his face was not concealed at all. This tactic of controlling the bludger is prohibited by Poke because it will affect the next game. But it's worth it. Albus could hardly lift his arms, but he didn't care at all. Anyway, we have won. In order to make the bludger obedient, they swung their arms with great force. They have persisted until now and are exhausted. In the last 10 minutes of the game, neither of them touched the bludger again. Their strength had been used up long ago, otherwise they would not let Geoffrey keep chasing Sweet. James and Albus were the key to this game. If they hadn't relied on this physically demanding tactic, it would have been difficult for Gryffindor to score more than a dozen goals. Gryffindor's possession rate for both the Quaffle and the bludger was far ahead of Slytherin. Under their protection, Lily, Sweet and other chasers were not disturbed by Slytherin. Madame Pomfrey had already come over with a medical kit to help James and Albus check their arms. Very bad. The muscles in your arms are seriously damaged. I'm afraid you'll have to wear bandages for 2 weeks. You shouldn't swing the bat so hard. Madame Pomfrey took out her wand in dissatisfaction and wrapped James and Albus' arms tightly with bandages. Great. James seemed very happy. We finally have an excuse not to do homework. This is not a joke, Potter. Madame Pomfrey scolded. If you don't treat your arms in time, you will never play Quidditch in your life. Not all injuries can be cured by magic. James pouted and didn't take it to heart. In the crowd, William and his wife came over accompanied by Professor Kane. Mr. Williams' expression was very complicated, but also with a trace of relief. Congratulations, thank you for letting me watch such a wonderful game. Pork said you are all geniuses, and he is right. We just don't want to embarrass Pork, Mr. William. Maureen said. When he comes back, he will be happy to know this. I don't know when he will come back. Sir, Pork will definitely come back. Maureen's voice was surprisingly calm. Mr. William looked at Maureen's eyes with different pupil colors, and was also slightly stunned for a moment, then nodded slightly. Thank you. James saw Professor Kane and said impatiently, Hey, Professor Kane, can I not submit the paper on turning dogs into tableware next week? Madame Pomfrey just said that my arm can't move for 2 months. It's 2 weeks, Potter. Madame Pomfrey emphasized. Maybe 2 months. Madame Pomfrey, you can say it's more serious. Don't worry, I have a strong psychological endurance and can stand it. James said with a smile. Honestly, James, if you had listened carefully in my class, you would have known that the paper I assigned was about turning dogs into furniture, not tableware. Professor Kane said with a smile, but it doesn't matter. I allow you not to do homework for a month. I will write leave notes to other professors, and the same goes for you, Albus. Great. James and Albus clapped their bandaged hands tremblingly. Sweet had put on his sunglasses again in the crowd. He did not join in the Gryffindor carnival, but was ready to leave with a broom. But Maureen pulled him back. Wait a minute, you are the key to this game. If you hadn't interfered with Scorpius, Slytherin would have won this game. Even if Slytherin caught the golden snitch, they couldn't win. The score would be the same, so it doesn't matter much? Sweet said expressionlessly. Maureen said, this victory belongs to everyone. We are already missing 3 people. It is unwise to miss one more person. Sweet was silent for a moment and asked, you saw it just now, didn't you? Maureen recalled the red light that appeared in Sweet's eyes when his sunglasses fell off. He thought for a while and then shook his head. I didn't see anything. Sweet frowned, then his expression eased a little and said, thank you. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba. Maureen was extremely surprised. These words coming out of Sweet's mouth were like snow in June. Usually, this cold and taciturn man would never say such things to others. Maureen didn't know whether Sweetie was thanking him for not asking what the red light was, or for holding Sweetie from a height of more than 20 meters. In any case, Maureen didn't care and just replied, we are on the same team. Hugo squeezed through the crowd with great effort and said excitedly, great, you created a miracle. Slytherin has never been defeated so badly. Geoffrey was probably furious because the ball was snatched from him by a first-year student, so he lost his mind and had to hit Sweetie. Sweetie, your move just now was really beautiful. Let Jeffrey hit Scorpius and screwed his teammates. Haha. You really should have seen Jeffrey's expression. But James suddenly kicked Hugo from behind. James. Why did you kick me? Hugo asked dissatisfiedly. James asked, tell me the truth, why did you give Maureen the problematic chocolate frog this morning? Who put the chocolate frog on Maureen's table? What chocolate frog? Hugo looked puzzled. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129 Punishment. Hugo didn't know what happened to the Gryffindor team. When Maureen told him the whole story, Hugo was very surprised. You mean the chocolate frog prevented Philia and Diana from playing? Hugo said a little uneasily, but I don't know where the chocolate frog came from. It was placed next to the plate in front of Maureen, and it was easy to see. If you suspect which Slytherin it was, then it is most likely Carlo. Carlo can't just happen to know your position. Sweet said beside him. Maureen pondered for a moment and said, he has a way to know it, if he went to the basement kitchen. Everyone's seat is not fixed when eating, but the house elves must know the specific position of each student. This is their responsibility. As long as someone asks the house elves, it is easy to know where Maureen sits when eating breakfast. James' eyes lit up, and he snorted, saying, very good, he dared to use such a despicable method, he asked for it. This matter is very important. If we don't find out who is the one who used the trick, we will have to be nervous when eating in the future, and it will never end. James directly told Professor Kane the whole story. Professor Kane's face showed a trace of anger. Using food to frame Gryffindor players and prevent his students from playing in the game is the most despicable behavior. Are you sure about this? Professor Kane asked seriously. Professor, we don't have the final say. You can just call a house elf to ask? Maureen said. Lulu. Professor Kane shouted the name of the house elf directly on the playground. With a pop, Lulu had already apparated to Professor Kane's side. As house elves, they are always on standby. It bowed and said, Sir, is there anything I can do for you? Who is responsible for Gryffindor's breakfast this morning? Did anyone specifically tell you to put a piece of chocolate frog next to Maureen's dining table? Professor Kane asked. Lulu said in confusion, Sir, I don't know. I'll go ask other people. Please wait a moment. With a pop, Lulu disappeared from the spot. About a minute later, Lulu came back with another house elf. Sir, I'm in charge of Gryffindor's breakfast today. My name is Lulu. A timid house elf whispered. Did you put the chocolate frog on Maureen's table? Professor Kane asked. Lulu's eyes flickered and he whispered, yes. All the Gryffindor players stared at Lulu angrily because the chocolate frog prevented Philia and Diana from playing. Lulu shuddered in fear. Who asked you to do this? Professor Kane continued to ask. No one, sir. I just wanted to give the chocolate frog to Mr. Walker, that's all. Lulu said in a crying voice. Don't be silly, Lolo. If you don't tell us about that person, we will go to see the principal, and she will handle this matter properly. Professor Kane stared at Lolo. If you don't want to receive the clothes. Sir, I don't know anything. I really don't know anything. Lolo panicked when he heard about the clothes, and looked at Professor Kane with a pleading face. Professor, house elves only know how to obey orders, and they will also keep secrets for people as required. I don't think it will casually tell the person who ordered it to do something. This is a rule they must abide by. Maureen knew that this matter had nothing to do with the house elves. Any student could ask the house elves to do things for them and then ask the house elves to keep it secret. Maureen knew it best. After all, he himself had sneaked out of school. Yes, they always regard students and teachers as half-masters, but they are not real masters after all, so they will not tell the truth. Then we can only find the people of the school board or the principal. They are the real masters of the house elves, and the orders of the master cannot be disobeyed. Professor Kane waved to Lolo and said, Come on, follow me to see the principal. You wait in the lobby on the first floor. I will find out the shameful guy. He actually used such a stupid method to frame my students. Do you really think that the house elves will keep a secret for him? Everyone followed Professor Kane to the castle. A large group of people and horses were marching. On the way, Maureen saw Carlo, who was pale on the side. When he saw Lolo following Professor Kane, His expression changed drastically and he ran away in a panic. Maureen and his friends did not wait long in the castle lobby. Soon Professor Kane and Principal McGonagall came down from upstairs. Lolo looked terrified. "Carlo, call him over." Although Principal McGonagall was very old, she still had an upright and dignified manner that made people feel in order. No one dared to provoke the principal. Carlo was soon called over by the Slytherin Students' Union president. He looked at Principal McGonagall with fear and did not dare to look her in the eye. "Lolo, explain the matter clearly in front of everyone," Principal McGonagall said without question. Lolo looked at Carlo timidly, while Carlo glared at him fiercely. Lolo shrank again, pointed at Carlo and whispered, "He gave me a chocolate frog, a pudding cake and a cup of chocolate coffee this morning and asked me to take them to Maureen Walker's table. I asked him why, but he told me not to ask any more questions and not to tell anyone else." The latest novel is published on 6th Book Bar. Maureen was extremely surprised. It turned out that it was not only the chocolate frog that had problems, but also so many other things. Fortunately, he had no appetite in the morning and could not eat anything. He lied. Carlo defended, "I didn't do it, this humble house elf framed me." Lie. Principal McGonagall looked at Carlo majestically, and her eyes made Carlo's face pale with fear. "Hogwarts house elves will not lie to me, I know this very well, Carlo Lestrange. Compared to your dirty tricks, house elves are much better than you in this regard, at least they will not take the initiative to frame people." "Principal, I didn't, I really didn't, I was not on the kitchen at that time, someone can help me testify." Carlo's face was pale, and he was still making a weak resistance. "I called you here, not to confront you, Carlo," Principal McGonagall said in a tough tone, "because once the Hogwarts house elf tells me that you did something, then it is undoubtedly you who did it. There is no need to defend yourself. Principal McGonagall has absolute management power over the house elves. The house elves will not lie to the principal, and their words are the best testimony for Principal McGonagall. You don't have to invent a few non-existent witnesses. It's unwise to drag them into perjury, Carlo. I thought you would be smarter, but you dared to poison the food." Headmaster McGonagall said angrily, "Put you on probation. Carlo Lestrange, if you violate any school rules again this semester, you will be expelled immediately. You will also be in detention for a semester and prohibited from participating in any activities. If the school needs labor, you must be present and you are not allowed to refuse with any excuse. I will let Filch keep a close eye on you." This punishment was quite severe. There were many ways to violate school rules, such as fighting with classmates, casting evil spells on classmates, and casting magic in the corridor where magic was prohibited, etc. However, Filch made a list of all students at the beginning of the school, which recorded the 1,562 rules of the Student Code of Conduct. Filch liked to catch students violating these rules the most. Carlo was about to bite his teeth to pieces, but he could do nothing. The headmaster had called his name in front of so many people, and he could no longer raise his head in school. Now he was going to be put in detention for a semester at the beginning of the school, and he would not be able to make any waves in the future. The students of Gryffindor looked at Carlo with contempt, and not only them, but also students from other colleges gathered around him. They basically spit on this stupid and despicable guy in their hearts. Chapter 130, Marks on the Notebook. Principal McGonagall glanced at the students who were watching and continued, "At this juncture, a student has disappeared during the holidays. We don't know whether he left the school secretly or something happened, but you'd better behave yourself. Any similar incidents will be severely punished." The disappearance of Poker and the attack on the Hogwarts train have already made Principal McGonagall very upset. Now Carlo is seeking his own death and running into the gun. No punishment is too much? And Lolo. Principal McGonagall turned her head and looked at Lolo. "You shouldn't let this happen. This is your fault." "Master, please, Lolo doesn't want clothes." Lolo lay on the ground and cried. "I won't give you clothes, Lolo." Although Principal McGonagall is strict, she still knows right from wrong. The house elves only know how to obey. They will help any student to do anything. Principal McGonagall continued, "You are not responsible for this matter, but you are not allowed to be in charge of food in the future. Go hungry for a day as punishment. Go back and tell all the house elves that the food of any students and teachers is not allowed to be replaced in the future. I don't want to see what happened today again. And the most important thing is that students are not allowed to step into the kitchen again." Thank you, Master." Lolo got up and disappeared on the spot. Students are not allowed to step into the kitchen again? The last point made many students complain bitterly. Many students would sneak into the kitchen to find something to eat when they were hungry. For example, James was a frequent visitor to the kitchen. When Principal McGonagall said this rule, many students looked at Carlo with anger in their eyes, wishing to eat him alive, because it was because of this ignorant guy who dragged them down. This bastard, I must find a way to beat him up. James was very angry. Count me in, this guy is really brainless. It's okay to kill himself, but he also caused the principal to seal the kitchen sanctuary. Albus spat. Maureen was in the same mood as them. He had originally sneaked out of the school through the kitchen passage, so this way, the kitchen passage was equivalent to being blocked. Starving for a day? This punishment is too severe. This is not the fault of the house elves. They don't know how to resist it all. Rose said dissatisfiedly beside her. Please, Rose. Hugo glanced at his sister. Let the House Elf Promotion Association take a day off. Luo is an accomplice anyway. This is already the lightest punishment. Gryffindor defeated Slytherin under unfavorable circumstances, but James and Albus will not be able to participate in the competition for a few weeks. Fortunately, the competition is a round-robin system, and there will be no Gryffindor competition in the next 3 weeks. But Maureen has a lot of things to worry about now. He originally wanted to ask Arnag for clarification, but Arnag's parchment never replied and was still out of contact. Although the half-bottle of Dragon Flame Cold Repellent can be confirmed to be real, Maureen has no intention of using it casually. In the following days, Carlo's arrogant look was no longer seen on campus. He was now cautious and did not dare to make any mistakes. He would avoid Maureen when he saw her. He did not want to make trouble for himself. There was still no news about Pork. His parents were ready to leave the school. After all, they were Muggles. It was not a good idea to stay in a place where wizards gathered for too long. I will ask Professor Francis to send you home directly. I hope you don't mind apparition, but that is the fastest way. Principal McGonagall said. As for Pork, we will do our best to investigate this matter. The Ministry of Magic has already taken over this matter. I believe there will be results soon. Principal McGonagall personally sent William's parents to the castle gate, and the members of the Gryffindor team were there too. Thank you for your trouble. Mr. Williams said. He glanced at the Gryffindor team members, then handed a notebook to Maureen and said, I found this in Poker's dormitory. He has been obsessed with Quidditch tactics over the years and has studied many effective Quidditch tactics. You are the most promising new star in the team. Before he comes back, I hope you can keep it for him. Maureen took the notebook and said, Thank you, Mr. William. We believe Poker will definitely come back safely. Well, you have to cheer up in the next game. James and Albus, you two can't use that desperate tactic anymore. Mr. William said. James and Albus paid a great price to win that game, which Mr. William could see. We will be fine. James and Albus still had bandages on their hands, like a mummy, saying nonchalantly. Led by Professor Francis, Mr. and Mrs. William walked along the path towards the door. What does the school say, James? Maureen asked, standing at the door of the castle, holding Poker's notebook. James shook his head. There is no clue about this matter. The school can't be sure whether Pork disappeared in the school or disappeared after secretly leaving the school. However, the Department of Mysteries is tracking Pork. The mysterious department of the Ministry of Magic is still quite capable. Pork is not yet an adult. If he casts magic outside the school, the Department of Mysteries will definitely find him. By the way, can Pork apparate? Maureen asked. He can. It is taught in the 6th grade. He is studying in Hogsmeade Village. However, he is a minor and has not taken the apparition test yet, let alone him. James smiled softly and said, I can do it too. I also studied in Hogsmeade on weekends last year. This is not difficult. You can learn it too. Maureen's heart sank a little more. The man on the train also appeared and left. The latest novels are published on the 6th grade 9-book bar. It would be difficult for the Department of Mysteries to find Pork by using underage magic outside the school. If the person who attacked the Hogwarts train was Pork, he was allowed to perform magic on the train and would not be discovered by the Department of Mysteries. And if he apparated directly from the train to Hogsmeade Village, there would be no violation. Isn't it difficult to learn apparition? Maureen really wanted to learn apparition. Maybe he would consider it. At least when danger comes, he will not be so passive like last time. It's not difficult. It's no problem to have a little magical talent, as long as you are not as stupid as Albus. James said, I heard that you are very good at magic, so you must learn this quickly. Oh, shut up. James, I just lost a tuft of hair. Everyone will be like this when they try it for the first time. Some people are even worse than me. Maybe they will lose their head. Albus pouted beside him. But you haven't mastered it yet, which is very telling. James said. Maureen returned to the lounge and opened Poker's notebook, which was filled with various Quidditch diagrams and many notes on how to avoid the opponent's siege and how to counterattack. Most of these tactics were mentioned in normal training, and Maureen was not unfamiliar with them. Just as he was about to close the notebook, he suddenly inadvertently made a strange mark on the last page of the notebook. The mark looked like a pen, with an eye drawn on the tip of the pen, half open and half closed. Chapter 131 The Real Common Ground. Maureen stared at the mark and felt familiar. He quickly remembered where the mark came from. Last time when he was helping Professor Charles check whether the magic of the portraits in the castle had been lost, he had seen this mark in a painting. P. Ingrid's painting. Maureen remembered this very clearly, because P. Ingrid's painting of the coexistence of Muggles and wizards impressed him deeply, not only because there were both motionless Muggles and waving wizards in the same painting, but also because it was in this painting that a strange person was peeping at him behind the curtains of the room in the painting. Not to mention that at that time, Professor Charles took the painting away. Although it was hung back later, Maureen had seen this mark on the painting. Why is there this mark on Poke's notebook? Maureen was a little confused. Could it be that Poke was a fan of P. Ingrid? He flipped through the other pages of the notebook, but there was no other handwriting except this mark on the last page. Maureen looked at the P. Ingrid mark for a long time, but he couldn't see anything strange. He could only put Poke's notebook away first. For 2 consecutive weeks, Maureen was thinking about the P. Ingrid mark. He even asked Poker's friend Solo, but the answer he got was that Poker did not show any signs of being interested in painting, and it was not clear whether Poker would study painters like P. Ingrid. This made Maureen even more puzzled. If Poker was not interested in painting, why would he draw a P. Ingrid mark in his notebook? Maybe he just scribbled it on paper. He saw it in a book and then drew it casually. Don't think too much. Poker may not be a painter. During the spell class, Hugo was discussing this issue with Maureen. He waved his wand and a rose with sparks flew out from the tip of the wand. Hugo's flowers always emit fire. In fact, flowers with sparks have their own characteristics. However, the rose Hugo conjured was burned and withered by the fire in a few seconds. Flitwick was teaching them how to use the flower charm. The biggest feature of this spell was that because everyone liked different flowers, the flowers that could be conjured up using the flower charm were also different. As for how to conjure up other flowers, that would be the content of the next class. You're right, but I still find it a little strange. Maureen's desk was already piled with a large bunch of bright purple daisies, each of which was thriving. Not only that, he also conjured up 2 roses and a bunch of pansies. He already knew how to use the flower charm to conjure up different flowers. Not everyone can draw a talking little man on paper like the 2 of us, so don't mind it. Hugo turned his head and said to Lily proudly, think about it, the people Lily draws can't talk. Who said the people I draw can't talk? Lily had already conjured up 2 of her favorite jasmine flowers. Can the people you draw talk too? Maureen asked in surprise. Of course, why do you ask? Is this your privilege or something? Lily looked at Maureen's desk with envy. I can get a pansy, I like this flower too. Give it all to you. Maureen waved his wand and conjured up 2 more bunches of pansies. Impossible. Hugo looked at Lily in surprise and said, I've never seen you draw talking little man. Just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean I can't draw it, look. Lily took out a piece of paper and a pen from her school bag and casually drew a simple head, with 2 lines for eyebrows, a few curls for hair, and freckles on the nose, but no body was drawn. Speak, Hugo. Lily pointed at the man on the paper. Am I Hugo? The doodle with only a head asked curiously, blinking his eyes, and the freckles on his nose twitched. Your name is not Hugo. The real Hugo is much more handsome. Hugo pouted, and then said a little disappointedly, I thought I finally surpassed you in some aspects. I didn't know you had a magical talent for painting, and you never told me. I don't like painting, why should I say it? Lily waved her wand again, and a jasmine flower bloomed on the tip of her wand. Maureen and Hugo found out that they could draw talking people in Professor Charles's Muggle Studies class, but Lily's understanding of Muggles was much better than the two Muggle illiterates, so she didn't go to class. A light suddenly flashed in Maureen's mind. He frowned, looked at Hugo and Lily, turned around and looked at Sweet, who was sitting alone at the back of the classroom. There was a bunch of red blood orchids on Sweet's desk. Maureen looked around. Their spells class was with Ravenclaw students. Soon he saw Delia, a Ravenclaw student who was chatting and laughing with her classmates. He walked towards Delia. This is the advantage of the Charms class. Professor Flitwick's class is very casual. Everyone is noisy and can run around at any time. There are all kinds of flowers everywhere in the classroom. The fragrance of the flowers mixed together is unique. Maureen walked to Delia and asked, "Well, Delia, can I ask you a question?" Delia seemed a little surprised to see Maureen suddenly come to ask her. After all, she had never talked to Maureen before, but it was true that she knew Maureen. Almost everyone in the school knew Maureen, the star of Gryffindor. "What's the question?" Delia said. "If you draw a person on paper, this person can speak, right?" Maureen asked. "How do you know?" Delia was surprised. "The people I drew can really talk. Before I went to school, I drew a doll on paper. The doll could talk to me and scared my neighbor and playmate. He is a Muggle." "Why are you asking this?" "The latest novels are first published on the 6th book bar on September 9th. Just asking casually, you should not have taken the Muggle Studies class, right?" Maureen asked again. "My parents don't know magic. They are real Muggles, and I know Muggles very well," Delia said. "Oh, so that's the case." Maureen nodded thoughtfully, and then said, "You can draw people who can talk. This is a very unique talent. Professor Charles said that few people can draw people who can speak." "Really?" Delia seemed very interested in this matter. "Yes, you can ask other people. Not many people can do this. By the way, the lily you conjured is really nice." Maureen smiled politely, and then found Jamie in the classroom who was trying the flower spell. The flower Jamie summoned was just a bud, not blooming. He walked over and asked Jamie the same question again. "Oh, yes. The people I draw can talk. I heard them talk about Professor Charles' class last time. You, Sweet and Hugo can also draw people who can talk. This is amazing, isn't it?" Jamie said happily. He is a half-blood and knows a lot about Muggles. He didn't attend Professor Charles' Muggle Studies class, but he is a Gryffindor student after all. He must have heard about this from his roommates who took the Muggle Studies class when he went back. "Yes, that's right, mine can talk too." Maureen was vaguely excited. He felt that he seemed to have really found the common point of these missing people, as if he had touched the fog. Chapter 132: A person with painting talent. Delia from Ravenclaw and Jamie from Gryffindor are among the missing amnesiacs, as are Hugo, Lily and Sweet. What these people have in common is that they all have extraordinary talent for painting. Even if they don't have painting skills, as long as they learn, they can draw people who can talk, like Circulate and the Fat Lady. Maureen always felt that this matter must have something to do with the painting. Thinking of the day when he was spied on by the person in the painting and Professor Charles went to buy something that could imprison the person in the painting and prevent him from escaping, he felt that he was about to uncover the mystery. But this alone is not enough. He must also determine whether the other people also have extraordinary painting talents. The most important thing is that Maureen also has a talent for painting, but he has never disappeared. He told Hugo about his discovery, and Hugo was quite surprised. He asked, "Why didn't you disappear? If Professor Charles really wanted to start with someone with a talent for painting, why didn't he look for you? You also have a talent for painting, right?" "I don't know, but you go ask Mosby from Hufflepuff first, and I'll ask Poker's friend Solo. If the two of them are the same, then at least we have found a breakthrough point," Maureen said. The two of them acted separately, and it was not difficult to ask this question. They soon got the same news. Mosby was a mixed race, but he didn't know he had this ability. He only discovered it after Hugo reminded him, while Poker had this ability from the beginning, because when he was thinking about Quidditch tactics in the dormitory, the flying figures he often drew on paper would speak, and his roommates knew this very well. So Professor Charles specifically targeted those of us who have a talent for painting. No wonder he gave us a class on Muggle and Wizard painting that day. He wanted to find another person to target, but unfortunately there was no one else in the class except the three of us. Hugo and Maureen met in the common room. The matter that had troubled them for so long finally had a clue. Both of them were eager to find more clues. He has found me, but he didn't target me. Maybe he knew that I could go back to the past. Maureen sat on the chair, looking at the icon of Pangard on Poke's notebook, and continued, maybe the time converter is on him. Every time he goes back to the past, he takes someone away. Maybe there is something special about me that makes me unaffected by the time converter, so I look like I have gone back to the past. But why? Why does he have to go back to the past every time he takes someone away? Hugo asked puzzledly. Because he wants to make sure he won't be discovered. Maureen closed his notebook and said, for example, when he attacks you, he must first track where you will go within an hour, who you will meet, and when is the best time to attack you. Once the best time is determined, he will use the time converter to go back to the past, re-experience what just happened, and kidnap you at the best time, so that he can be foolproof. Hugo's eyes lit up. Maureen's speculation was very reasonable, which explained why Maureen and others could never find out when Hugo and the others disappeared. It is not so easy to kidnap someone in the Hogwarts castle, because you never know when a student will suddenly come from a corner. With a time converter, you can prevent this. But where did he kidnap us? What did he do to us? Was it just to have a few dark wizard's marks on our backs? Hugo said helplessly, there is another point. Lily insisted that there was no strange mark on her back. I am not very clear about this, but there is an icon drawn by Pangard on Poker's notebook, and I was spied on by a person in a painting in the castle last time. That person happened to be a character in Pangard's painting. I always feel that there is some connection between the two. There is no class in the afternoon. Let's go to the library to check the life of Pangard. Maureen stood up and picked up his school bag, and Hugo followed. The two of them walked from the common room on the 8th floor to the library, and deliberately went around to the 7th floor to take a look at the empty classroom. When Maureen passed the corridor on the 7th floor, he found that the order of the paintings on the 7th floor corridor had been moved again. This time, he carefully wrote down the order and content of the paintings. If there is confusion next time, maybe he can find clues from the paintings. When he opened the door of the classroom, he found that Peeves was wandering in the classroom again. It's you, the Weasley again. Peeves grabbed a wastebasket and was about to throw it at Hugo, but when he saw Maureen, he panicked and yelled I freak, then threw the chalk and wastebasket aside and ran away through the wall. Huh? Why did Peeves run away again when he saw me? Maureen asked in confusion. This guy must be scared of you. Hugo laughed, he even called you a double-eyed freak. He really knows how to give people nicknames. Last time he called me a red-haired ghost. Maureen frowned, that's unlikely, right? The only time Peeves and I had an encounter was when James Albus and you went to deal with him together. With Peeves' vengeful nature, how could he be afraid of a first-year student like me? Peeves has teased countless classes of students in the Hogwarts castle. Every freshman will be teased by Peeves when they first enter school. Almost all students dare not speak out against Peeves' pranks, because if they fight back, Peeves will chase them for revenge for many days. It is rumored that only the Bloody Baron from Slytherin can deal with him. Maureen offended Peeves soon after the start of the school term. Normally, Peeves would pop out to cause trouble when he went to the toilet. However, in the past half-year, Peeves had not come to seek revenge on him. The last time he saw Peeves in this classroom, Peeves turned around and ran away in fear. It was the same this time. Who knows? Let's see what's different about this classroom. Oh, Peeves is really a rough guy. He can curse so badly. Hugo looked at the dirty words on the blackboard with disgust. There were dirty words like Hoyle, your whole family is crackling and clattering, and Bloody Barrow, your whole family is ping-pong and clanging. Anyone with a little education would not curse so badly. I know Bloody Barrow, but this Hoyle. Why do I feel so familiar? Have I heard of this name somewhere? Maureen pondered. The latest novels are first published on 69shoe.com. I don't know, maybe it's someone who has punished Peeves like you. There are many people who hate Peeves, and there must be many who can punish him. Hugo guessed. Maureen didn't remember who this person was for a while, and he didn't care about Peeves's curses. After making sure that there was nothing unusual in this classroom, he went to the library with Hugo. It was not difficult to find the deeds of Pangard in the library, because he was a very famous painter, and his paintings were based on the theme of harmonious coexistence between Muggles and wizards. It was quite rare to have moving and non-moving characters in the same painting. With the help of Madame Pants, they soon found a lot of books about Pangard. Chapter 133, The Wizard's Comic Strip. Piengid, a famous painter in the 18th century, created classic and outstanding paintings with distinctive personal characteristics. He was famous for his paintings in which Muggles and wizards coexisted in the same painting. His superb painting skills have long been lost, and no one knows how he created motionless characters. Being able to draw completely motionless Muggle characters as a wizard is a curiosity for wizards. Hugo was reading a thick book in a low voice. The title of the book was The Art of Movement and Immobility, The Legendary Painting Skills of Piengid. He continued, "This is really amazing. A wizard can actually draw motionless characters. Is he a half-blood or something? But I remember that wizards of Muggle origin can't do this. The people drawn by wizards must be moving. Only Muggles and squibs can draw motionless people. Wizards can't do this." Piengid is undoubtedly a wizard, but he can take into account two different forms of painting, which is amazing and has attracted much attention from the wizarding world. Professor Charles told Maureen all these things at the time, so he was not surprised. What Maureen wanted to find now was the icon about Piengid, which appeared in Pork's notebook and the painting of the castle. But Maureen frowned slightly. He looked through all the information about Piengid, but there was no information about the strange icon in Pork's notebook. "Have you found this icon of Piengid?" Maureen showed Hugo the icon drawn in Pork's notebook. "What is this icon?" Hugo looked at the icon carefully. "Why can't you open your eyes? Are you still asleep?" "I don't know. I saw this icon on the painting of the castle, and now it appears in Pork's notebook. I always feel that something is wrong." Maureen said, "There are so many things wrong. Maybe this icon is just something that Poker saw somewhere and drew casually. Don't mind it." Hugo turned another page and read, "Piengid once used a brush to create a comic story collection. It is about how a warrior defeated a dark wizard who wanted to rule wizards and Muggles. This story is very familiar. Isn't that the story of Harry Potter and Voldemort? Come on. Throughout the ages, which dark wizard is not ambitious to rule the wizarding world and the Muggle world? Voldemort is not the only one. Wasn't Grindelwald defeated by Dumbledore for the same purpose? Even the Wolf King Rakenlove that Sweet mentioned last time, he wanted to turn all wizards in the world into werewolves, and then raise Muggles as food for werewolves." Maureen said, "There are only a few definitions of dark wizards. Genius black wizards with strong strength and ambition want to rule everything and gain supreme power and status. This belongs to the category of strategic black wizards. The rest are the dark wizards who are unwilling to be lonely and want to do some black magic to make extra money. These dark wizards do not have the ability to rule the world, but they have the ability to create chaos to make huge profits. You are right, but I like wizard comics very much. They are much better than Muggle comics. Last time I saw a Muggle comic from my grandfather, the characters on it could not move at all, they were stupid and dull, and there was no interest at all." Hugo curled his lips and continued, "I will look for Piengid's comic story collection. Maybe he has also drawn a wonderful story." Hugo quickly found the picture he wanted to see, on the last page of his book. The biggest difference between wizard comics and Muggle comics is that wizard comics only have one page, but this page encompasses the entire story. What the people in the comic story do is presented on one page, which is a bit similar to Muggle cartoons. However, the most important point is that in wizard comics, if the wizard is not satisfied with a plot arrangement in the picture, he still has the opportunity to slightly modify the plot. For example, if the author of a comic book kills everyone's favorite character, and a wizard is dissatisfied with the author's plot arrangement, he can discuss with the murderer in the picture and ask him not to kill the person, or persuade the protagonist in the picture to rush to the murder scene to save people. Someone is going to be killed, and the people in the comic book can understand what the wizard says. But after all, they are not real people. Some people in the picture are easier to communicate with. If you can convince him, he will agree to let the other party go, and will do things that have nothing to do with the original plot, according to the requirements of the wizard reader. If some people in the picture are very stubborn and you can't convince him, then it will be difficult to deal with. In short, this requires communication skills. However, this kind of thing can only make you have fun. After 10 minutes, it will return to the original plot. Who lives and who dies is determined. Moreover, any wizard cannot interfere with the original plot when reading the comic book for the first time. Only when reading it for the second time can he have the opportunity to change it. This can ensure that the wizard can see the original plot of the creator first. Although there are some limitations, at least the Wizard comic strip can make the story more colorful through the intervention of wizards, and make up for some regrets with what readers want to see. Let me take a look at the original plot of this comic strip first to see if there is anything I am not satisfied with. Maybe I can modify the plot. Hugo pointed at a handsome young man on the cover with interest and said, "Hey, get to work, tell me your story quickly." The young man in the picture immediately began to move, and all the pictures on the paper began to switch constantly, starting his adventure. In the process of reading the comic strip, Hugo seemed to be dissatisfied with the protagonist going to the store to buy a set of leather wizard chess. He kept whispering that the protagonist should buy a set of wizard chess made of loam only for wood, because the chess pieces were more obedient, but the protagonist ignored him. "He will definitely lose miserably with this set of chess pieces," Hugo said confidently. "Do you often interfere with the plot of comic strips?" Maureen asked casually. "Yes, haven't you done that?" Hugo asked back. "Oh, I did. When I was reading the comic book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, I was very sad when Dumbledore died. I even discussed with Professor Snape in the picture and asked him not to kill Dumbledore," said Maureen. After Harry Potter defeated Voldemort, the Wizarding World published a comic book called Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Although it was just a simplified short story, it was still popular in the Wizarding World. Almost every child from a wizard family had read this comic book. "What happened next?" Hugo asked. "The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba." Professor Snape disagreed. "He looked too gloomy and difficult to communicate with. He didn't listen to me at all. So I found Professor Flitwick, who was easier to communicate with, and told him to stop pretending to be knocked unconscious by the spell and to get up quickly to stop Professor Snape. Headmaster Dumbledore didn't die at that time because of my intervention," Maureen said. According to the plot of the comic strip, Professor Flitwick was knocked unconscious by Professor Snape. In the picture, Professor Flitwick was still lying on the ground and sleeping soundly. It was Maureen who woke him up by forcibly tickling him. "By the way, I also asked George to save his brother Fred, and the twins survived," Maureen said again. "James is even more amazing," Albus said in awe. "He actually persuaded Voldemort in the comic strip to turn over a new leaf and become a vegetarian. Can you believe it?" Maureen couldn't help laughing, and then Madame Pants glared at them, waved her wand, and the feathered duster floated over and knocked on their table, asking them to be quiet. "The people in the paintings are different from real people, so it's no big deal that Voldemort is a vegetarian." Maureen stood the book up to block Madame Pants's view, and whispered, "When I was 7 years old, I read this and told Voldemort righteously that killing was wrong. The Voldemort in the painting said that he was forced to do it because the plot was arranged like this. He is also different from the real Voldemort. He originally just wanted to be a quiet and handsome man, open a pet snake shop and teach everyone to learn Parseltongue." Hugo laughed, and this time Madame Pants directly hit them both on the head with a feather duster. Chapter 134, Pictionavo. "By the way, what's the name of the comic strip created by Piangd?" After Madame Pants left, Maureen asked in a low voice. "It's called The Wizard's Tomorrow, and the protagonist is Hoyle, who is quite handsome and looks like a righteous person who defeated a dark wizard who wanted to rule the world. His name is Pixuo." "What's it called?" Maureen frowned. "Pixuo, if you ask me, this is a really strange name, isn't it?" Hugo repeated. "No, what's the name of the protagonist?" Maureen asked. "Hoyle, this name is not very good. Show me the book." Maureen took Hugo's book and carefully checked the comic strip The Wizard's Tomorrow drawn by Piangd. The protagonist is a young man with a righteous and sunny face. When facing evil, he has the courage to move forward, which is admirable. Hoyle. Have you forgotten? When we were in the classroom on the 7th floor just now, did Peeves also write this name on the wall?" Maureen asked in surprise. "Oh, now that you mention it, I remember that Peeves did write this sentence on the wall." Hugo suddenly realized, but then he said, "In Piangrd's painting, Hoyle is a great hero who punishes evil and eliminates evil. Such a person can make people like Peeves tremble with fear. It is normal for Peeves to want to scold him. But is it possible?" Maureen looked at Hoyle in the comic strip carefully and said, "Will Peeves be terrified by the people in the painting? If he doesn't like the people in the painting, he will just pick up the paint and throw it on them. Will he be afraid? Peeves has never been a person who is willing to suffer losses. There are not many people in the castle who can deal with him. You two go out and chat?" The two of them talked too loudly, and this time they were finally kicked out of the library by Madame Pants. Before Maureen was kicked out, he borrowed this book, Moving and Still, The Legendary Painting Skills of Peengard. He felt that he needed to figure this out. Are you really going to ask Peeves who this Hoyle is? Hugo asked. Is there no need for that? Hoyle is just the protagonist in the painting, isn't he? I think this name sounds familiar. Before Peeves wrote the name Hoyle on the blackboard, I must have heard of it somewhere earlier, maybe in a book, or maybe someone told me accidentally, just at that time. Maureen frowned. When he saw Peeves scolding Hoyle on the blackboard just now, he felt that the name was a little familiar, but for a moment he forgot where he had heard it. Hey, men, you read so many books, can you remember everyone's name? This Hoyle is a character painted by Peengard, and he is also a very famous person. Don't be too surprised to have seen him somewhere. Hugo said. No. Maureen shook his head. It happened recently. It should be not long ago. I did something. I must have heard the name Hoyle somewhere. The two returned to the common room. Maureen sat in the corner and picked up the book again. He turned to the comic book and continued to read the content of The Wizard's Tomorrow. Then he was stunned and exclaimed. What's wrong? Hugo turned his head and asked while warming himself by the fireplace next to him. This mark. The mark that appeared in Peengard's painting. Maureen pointed to the comic book. Hoyle in the painting saw a mark on the wall, a pen, and an eye under the tip of the pen. Hugo stepped over from the sofa beside the fireplace, came to Maureen, looked at the place where Maureen pointed, and then said, Oh, this mark. This is the mark of Pixiavo, but it can also be regarded as Hoyle's mark. In the plot of The Wizard of Tomorrow, Pixiavo set this mark, and its eyes were completely open. In order to fight against Pixiavo, Hoyle used the mark with closed eyes as his badge, implying that he would definitely make Pixiavo close his eyes forever, and yours is even more different. Maureen took out Poke's notebook and compared it with Pixiavo's mark. The two were indeed different. The mark on Hoyle in The Wizard of Tomorrow had closed eyes, and Pixiavo's eyes were open, while the mark on Poke's notebook had half open and half closed eyes. How weird. Maureen quickly read The Wizard's Tomorrow from the beginning again. I need to think about it. The two marks belong to two fictional wizards created by Peengard. It's no big deal if they appear in Peengard's paintings, but it's a bit strange if they appear in Poke's notebook. Having said that, The Wizard's Tomorrow is still very good, but this dark wizard is too weak and can't compare to Voldemort. Hugo sat next to Maureen and poked the dark wizard Pixiavo in the comic strip and said, Isn't it? You useless dark wizard. My dignity cannot be challenged, stupid boy, you will crawl at my feet one day. Pixiavo in the painting stared at Hugo coldly in a low voice. He didn't look like someone who was easy to mess with. But Hugo poked Pixiavo's head again. The dark wizard Pixiavo in the painting cried out in pain, squatted down, and said angrily, Can you respect the bad guys? Bad guys also have dignity. Are you going to die if you pretend to be afraid of me? I'm so scared. Hugo grinned and whispered to Maureen, Can this idiot really go against the sky? The latest novel is first published on Liuji 9 Shuba. Maureen asked the Pixiavo in the painting, pointing to the icon on Poke's notebook, Do you know what this means? It means that I will bring darkness to this world, you humble wizard, tremble. Pixiavo pretended to be ferocious and said, Wait until the Eye of Judgment goes, it will be my kingdom. Puff. Hugo laughed again, and couldn't help stretching out his hand to poke Pixiavo's eyes. The Pixiavo in the painting protested angrily, covering his poked eyes, and shouted that he would give Hugo to Avada Kedavra. What the hell, the Eye of Judgment, take care of your own eyes first. Hugo said disdainfully. Maureen asked Hoyle in the painting again, When have you ever left a comic strip to wander around in the painting of the castle? Oh, you silly boy, we in the comic strip exist to promote the development of the plot, and we have great responsibilities. How can we wander around and waste time like you idle people? Pixiavo was forced behind a tree by Hugo, and he stuck his head out to interrupt. Hoyle smiled and said, We are all under a spell and cannot leave the comic strip at will. People in the book cannot leave, which is different from the photo frame. What is the ending? The eyes were poked out? I didn't look at the ending carefully just now. Maureen just glanced at it roughly and didn't care so much. Yes. Hugo laughed. Pixiavo's open eyes were poked out by Hoyle with a knife and fork, and became Hoyle's mark. Well done, Hoyle. Thank you. Hoyle in the painting bowed to Hugo. Knife and fork. Maureen thought carefully for a long time, then suddenly slapped his head, closed the book, and said, Knife and fork, That's right, it's knife and fork. I know where else I've heard the name Hoyle besides what Peeves wrote on the blackboard. Chapter 135 Hoyle. Where? Hugo asked as he sat down. In the painting. In the painting of the castle. Last time we helped Professor Charles check if the painting magic of the castle had been lost. Do you remember this? Maureen said quickly. That's when I heard about the name Hoyle. It was said by a person in the painting. Maureen still remembered that he found that he seemed to be spied on, and then he kept looking for that feeling of being spied on. He accidentally smeared a sandwich in a picture of 13 wizards eating. In the end, he took the picture down, and the cutlery, fork and people in it rolled into a ball. At that time, one of the wizards said angrily, "You are more annoying than that bastard Hoyle." Maureen stood up and said, "Yes, that's when I heard the name Hoyle." Wait, you mean the wizard in the painting in the castle knows Hoyle? Hugo thought for a while and said, "But they are both people in the painting, so there's nothing wrong with knowing Hoyle, right? Hoyle was originally a character in the comic strip, right? The characters in the paintings in the book cannot leave the book, and the last time I heard the wizard's tone, he seemed to hate Hoyle, which means he must have met Hoyle. This Hoyle should not be the person in the comic strip, but the person in the castle painting. What if Hoyle? What if Hoyle is actually the person who was spying on me in the painting at that time?" Maureen said. "What does this mean? Hoyle is a character created by Piengid, right? At that time, I felt that I was being spied on, and that person existed in Piengid's painting. What if that person is Hoyle created by Piengid?" Maureen's mind was thinking quickly, and he felt that he had grasped some key points. Hugo nodded thoughtfully. "Are you saying that Piengid painted his protagonist in Wizards of Tomorrow in the picture of the community where Muggles and wizards coexist? In other words, Hoyle is the person in the painting who wants to tell you the truth." "Yes, Hoyle in Piengid's writing is a brave and upright man. He is a wizard who fights against the dark wizard Pixiwo. He may have accidentally seen Professor Charles carrying out some conspiracy and wanted to tell it out, but Professor Charles noticed it. He had to block Hoyle's mouth and kill him." Maureen remembered meeting Professor Charles in Diagon Alley a few days before Christmas, and said, "Professor Charles went to buy black gentian bile, which can restrict the person in the painting from leaving the frame. If I'm right, when we were checking the magic of the painting in the castle that day, Professor Charles discovered Hoyle and moved Piengid's painting away. He wanted to do something to Hoyle, just like he did to Circulate." Maureen remembered that the painting didn't need to be repaired at that time because the magic had not been lost, but Professor Charles still moved it away, saying that he wanted to take it back for research, but Maureen always believed that Professor Charles took the painting away for more than just research. Maureen continued, "I think that at that time, Hoyle must have found a way to escape, so Professor Charles had to use the black gentian to trap Hoyle, who was escaping in other paintings in the castle, and make him shut up forever. This explains why the painting in Piengid was hung back by Professor Charles not long after." Maureen analyzed calmly. "Professor Charles wanted to wait and see, he must have been watching nearby all the time to catch Hoyle. Maybe the painting in Piengid has been painted with black gentian. That painting is not a portrait, and Hoyle can't escape to a portrait in another place like Circulate, so he must still be in the castle now, maybe hiding in a painting in the castle." Hugo suddenly realized. That means Hoyle may still be alive, and Professor Charles is looking for him. Hugo nodded, and said curiously, "But why do the people in the painting hate Hoyle? Peeves is also scolding him. Isn't he a good person? Being a good person and having an unpleasant personality are not contradictory, Hugo. Have you forgotten Professor Snape? He is a good person, but can you say that students will like him? I heard that Professor Snape had a terrible popularity when he was a teacher and was one of the most unpopular teachers." Maureen thought for a moment and continued, "Maybe Hoyle didn't get along well with those noisy people in the paintings. He may have reported Peeves' troubles to the professor, and Peeves hated him too. But Hoyle saw Professor Charles' conspiracy, so he was ready to tell the truth, but unfortunately he never had the chance. Hoyle may know that I am investigating this matter and wants to tell me the truth. Then do we just need to find Hoyle, who is hiding in the castle, to get evidence against Professor Charles?" Hugo asked. "They have suspected Professor Charles for so long, but the most crucial evidence has not been found. There is only one-sided testimony from Circulate, and his testimony is not very reliable. It seems that Hoyle is very likely to have the most crucial evidence. As for the mark on Poker's notebook, maybe Poker also noticed something at the beginning and saw the painting of Piengid. Let's go. Let's take a look." Professor Charles put the painting back and waited for Hoyle to fall into the trap. We must find a way to get the evidence in Hoyle's hands before Professor Charles finds Hoyle. Maureen stood up, left the common room quickly, and ran towards the corridor on the 7th floor. At that time, Paingard's painting was hung on the wall opposite the stairs on the 7th floor. It was impossible to get there without a flying broom. They stood on the fence of the corridor on the 7th floor, looking at Paingard's painting from a distance. Maureen was holding a telescope used for astronomy class. Usually, because he could not see the star map, this telescope was useless to him, but now it could finally come in handy. I saw the painting and the mark. Maureen kept adjusting the knobs of the telescope to make the scene clearer. The wizard's telescope can adjust the distance by itself, but if you want to see more details, you need to do it yourself. I saw it too, but there are too many people in this painting. How can I find Hoyle? Hugo was also adjusting the viewing distance of the telescope. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. I don't know. That person should look like Hoyle in the painting of Wizards Tomorrow? But he may not dare to come back. Maybe he's hiding in other paintings nearby. Maureen carefully looked for Hoyle's traces in the crowded community map, but unfortunately he couldn't find it after a long time. He pointed the telescope at the picture of 13 wizards dining. It was someone in this painting who called out the name Hoyle. They were now chatting and laughing in an orderly manner, enjoying their dinner, and the tableware and food were placed properly, unlike the time when Maureen shook the room and the whole room became a disaster. It would be great if we could go up and ask the 13 wizards. Maybe they know which painting Hoyle likes to visit the most. Maureen put down the telescope and said, "You have to use a flying broom to go up. We are not allowed to fly around in the castle. It is against the school rules." Hugo said. Maureen shrugged his shoulders indifferently. He didn't care much about violating school rules, but he needed to find a time when no one was around. There were usually people coming and going in the castle. If you rode a flying broom up, he would definitely be seen. So he had to wait until night. "Good afternoon, what are you two doing here with telescopes?" Just as Maureen and Hugo were looking around in the corridor on the 7th floor with telescopes, Professor Charles' gentle voice sounded behind them, making Maureen and Hugo gasp. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136, Unfaithful Man. The voice startled both Maureen and Hugo. Hugo screamed and almost threw the telescope in his hand, but Maureen bumped Hugo with his arm to calm him down. "Good afternoon, Professor Charles." Maureen put down the telescope in his hand and said politely, "What are you two doing with the telescope?" Professor Charles asked politely. We are." Hugo was frightened and a little incoherent. He now had a Professor Charles phobia and couldn't help but think wildly when he saw Professor Charles. "We are appreciating the paintings in the castle, Professor Charles. We don't have classes this afternoon," Maureen said bravely. He looked at Professor Charles very calmly, without changing his face, trying to pretend that nothing had happened. "Oh, so?" Professor Charles nodded slightly, and looked up at the paintings on the opposite wall again, his eyes wandering. "The portraits in the castle are indeed worthy of attention. They all have a certain history. So which painting are you interested in?" Maureen thought for a moment, and he thought of an idea. "That painting by Paingard, Professor Charles. I have been very interested in it since you told me last time that it can allow muggles and wizards to coexist." Maureen looked closely at Professor Charles' eyes, trying to see any changes in his expression. If Professor Charles was really plotting something, he might be exposed after hearing Maureen's probing words. "Paingard's painting is really good. What do you see from it?" Professor Charles' eyes flickered slightly, and he was slightly surprised. "There's a person in the painting, Professor. It's very strange. He seems to want to return to his own frame, but he keeps looking around and doesn't dare to return to his own painting." Maureen tried to pretend to be confused, but his eyes did not leave Professor Charles' face. "I think this person in the painting is from the painting of Paingard." The smile on Professor Charles' face gradually disappeared, and he said uncertainly, "Are you sure?" "Yes, Professor, I can be sure that he has been wandering around the painting." Maureen actually didn't see anything. He just lied to test Professor Charles. Unexpectedly, Professor Charles' face really changed. "If you don't believe me, you can ask Hugo," Maureen said, bumping Hugo with his arm again. Yes, Professor, I saw it too. Hugo reacted quickly, and he immediately understood why Maureen said that. Although he was a little afraid of Professor Charles, he still agreed, that guy was sneaky and looked restless. Professor Charles' face became more and more solemn. In which painting did you see that guy? Not necessarily, he has been running around in all the paintings, Professor. Maureen pointed to the paintings hanging in the corridor on the 7th floor, and then said, we only saw him running over there, and then he disappeared. Professor Charles frowned and looked at the classroom in the corridor on the 7th floor. The expression on his face became more and more weird, but then he regained his gentle tone and smiled. In such nice weather, I suggest you go out and bask in the sun. Don't think too much. It's normal for people in the paintings to run around. Professor Charles did not walk towards the classroom in the corridor on the 7th floor, but went down to the stairs. When he reached the staircase platform between the 7th and 6th floors, the stairs happened to move. Professor Charles looked up and asked, Maureen, when you were on the train that day, did you really not see clearly the person who attacked you? Maureen was stunned for a moment, then said, Professor, I don't know, I just feel that the figure is a little familiar, but I forgot where I saw him. That's right. Professor Charles smiled and nodded, then you continue to appreciate these paintings. If you don't understand anything, you can ask me at any time. After Professor Charles finished speaking, he walked down the changing stairs, and greeted the occasional students passing by in a friendly manner on the way. Now it was Maureen and Hugo's turn to look at each other. I thought he would go there to see what was going on. Hugo couldn't help but whispered. Maureen stared at Professor Charles back, was silent for a long time, and said, it's not wise for him to go there. Why? If he wants to find that Hoyle, after hearing what you made up, shouldn't he go and see what's going on? Maybe he can catch that Hoyle. Hugo asked. If he goes now, won't we follow him? He won't let us follow him. Maureen explained, but he shook the telescope in his hand and said, and if he takes what we say seriously, he knows it's too late to go now. He has been trying to catch Hoyle for so long and still hasn't caught him. Even he knows that opportunities are fleeting. Maureen turned around and walked towards the lounge on the 8th floor with Hugo. There was no point for the two of them to stay here any longer. But you lied to him like this, aren't you afraid that you will anger him and make him attack us? Hugo asked. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Maureen shook his head. He has already attacked us, hasn't he? You have lost your memory and I have been attacked. Since we have been targeted, there is nothing to worry about. You are right. Hugo and Maureen walked around the corner together and saw the portrait of the fat lady from a distance. After a while, Hugo said again, but I still don't understand. If Professor Charles really wanted to attack you, why didn't he attack you at school? You know, he could just sneak attack you like he sneak attacked us. Isn't that easier? Why go to so much trouble? Maureen was also thinking about this problem, but he thought that the reason why Professor Charles didn't attack him was that he knew that he was not affected by the time converter. He wanted to catch Maureen and it was different from catching other people, so he secretly controlled Poker to attack him. Anyway, we have to find Hoyle first. He must know some secrets, unlike Circa Duggan, who can't help at all. Maureen walked to the portrait of the fat lady, looked at the fat lady who was dressing up, and said the password, "You are so beautiful." "Thank you, dear." The fat lady pulled up her skirt and saluted like a ballet dancer. Hugo held back his laughter. God knows what the fat lady was thinking. She actually changed the password to this. Every time a Gryffindor student wanted to enter the door, they would compliment the fat lady against their conscience. You know, the fat lady and the word beauty really don't go together, but the fat lady said that a long time ago, women considered fat to be beautiful, and they were proud of it. The fat lady's portrait had already rotated halfway, and Hugo continued, but we still don't know who Hoyle is, right? I mean, we know he is the protagonist of Wizards of Tomorrow, but we don't know what he means in Payengard's painting. Bang! The fat lady's half-open door slammed shut again. Hugo retracted his hand and was almost caught by the portrait frame. He said angrily, "What are you doing?" "We all said the password." "Hoyle. How dare you mention this damn heartless man?" The fat lady screamed, knocked all the cosmetics on the dressing table to the ground, and stepped on them hard with her feet. She looked furious. Chapter 137 The Fat Lady's Ex-Boyfriend. Unfaithful Man. Maureen and Hugo looked at each other in surprise. Was Hoyle the culprit who caused the fat lady to break up last time? Last time, The fat lady fell in love with someone in the painting, and then was dumped. She took her anger out on all the Gryffindor students and changed the password to "Men are heartless." All the Gryffindor boys protested, and then Professor Charles stepped in. Wait, Professor Charles? Maureen never knew who the fat lady's ex-boyfriend was, but she remembered that she asked Professor Charles who the fat lady's broken-hearted person was, and Professor Charles said he didn't know at the time. So, Professor Charles had already set his sights on Hoyle at the time? Maureen asked quickly, "Fat lady, that Hoyle is your..." "Shut up. Don't mention him in front of me." The fat lady seemed to be a little out of control. She threw the chair in the painting, overturned the vase in the painting, and then sat on the ground and cried. "I believed in him so much, but he actually abandoned me and said that there was no future for us. This unfaithful man. If he knew that there was no future for us, why would he be so good to me?" The fat lady cried loudly, her fat body twisted and turned, and her tears blurred her messy makeup. "I can't believe that Hoyle is still an unfaithful man." Hugo looked at the fat lady with sympathy. Maureen said quickly, "Fat lady, don't cry first, you may have misunderstood him." "Misunderstanding? How could I misunderstand him? He said break up and break up, without any mercy. It's best for such a scumbag to die early." The fat lady wiped her tears, smudged her eyeshadow, and painted her whole face black. "Maybe he has his own difficulties," Maureen persuaded. The fat lady finally stopped crying, but still looked at Maureen with tears on her face. "What difficulties can he have? His difficulty must be that he fell in love with another woman." The people in the painting were talking about love, which always made Maureen feel weird. It shouldn't be like this. If it were you, I would say. Maureen knew that she was going to lie again. Which woman in the castle can compare to you? After all, you are the work of Mr. Gryffindor, and you are of noble status. How can you compare to other women in the painting? You are good at talking. The fat lady pulled up a plaid handkerchief from the ground and wiped her face. The handkerchief wiped away the tears on her face. "You are right. I am of noble status, and he is not worthy of me. Such a person should be beaten to death." The fat lady sniffed and comforted herself. "That's not what I meant. I mean, maybe Hoyle has some unspeakable secrets? For example, someone wants to harm him. Did he say anything to you before this?" Maureen asked. "Harm him? Are you kidding? He is just a person in the painting," said the fat lady. "Then when you were with him, did you feel that there was something wrong with him? Or did he say something strange to you?" Maureen asked again. The fat lady picked up the fallen chair, then twisted her big butt and sat on it, leaning her elbows on the back of the chair, holding her chin, and said thoughtfully, "Now that you remind me, I really have some impression. He told me that something big would happen in Hogwarts, something about the dark spirit, and he didn't say anything more." "Dark spirit? He mentioned the dark spirit to you? What else did he say?" Maureen was shocked. He still didn't know what the dark spirit meant. "Anyway, I'm not very clear. Anyway, you guys go in quickly." The fat lady bent down to pick up the overturned things, opened the door of the common room, and asked them to go in quickly. It seemed that she didn't want to say anything more. Maureen and Hugo returned to their dormitory. Dewey crawled out of Maureen's pocket, jumped to the bedside table, picked up a piece of unopened multi-flavored candy and started to chew it. "Dark spirit, what else does Hoyle know?" Maureen pushed the quilt on the bed aside, then laid down and thought. "Don't think about it." Hugo picked up the book that fell under the bed and threw it on the cabinet. "It's useless to think about it now. We can only pray that Hoyle will not be caught by Professor Charles so soon." On the bedside table next to him, Circulate was shouting in dissatisfaction, "You little bastard, move your butt away, or I will draw my sword." Maureen turned his head and saw that Dewey was sitting on Circulate's portrait eating candy, with his butt facing Circulate, which made Circulate very angry. He was poking Dewey's butt with a sword, but Dewey ignored him at all. "By the way, Circulate." Maureen picked up Dewey and put her on his pillow. He took Circulate's photo frame and said, "Have you ever been to Paingard's painting?" "Who is Paingard? I haven't heard of it." Circulate blew angrily, trying to blow away a white hair that Dewey left on his head. "He is a painter. His paintings are very unique. The wizards in his paintings move, but the muggles in his paintings do not. By the way, do you know Hoyle? He may be the person in the painting." Maureen asked. "Hoyle? That self-righteous guy, of course I know him." Circulate said angrily, "This guy always looks down on us and feels as if he is superior to others. He is really annoying. Is he more annoying than you?" Hugo blurted out beside him. "Draw your sword. You red-haired guy, you insulted my dignity." Circaduggan shouted angrily, waving the long sword in his hand. "The Hoyle you hate has the same fate as you now. Professor Charles is chasing him. He should have caught Professor Charles' handle." Maureen sat up and helped Circaduggan sweep away the white hair on the photo frame. The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. Circaduggan put down his sword and asked in surprise, "Has he also been targeted by that demon?" "Probably. He is hiding in the paintings in the castle. Unfortunately, I don't know where exactly he's hiding." Maureen was not one of the people in the paintings. Some of the people in the paintings ignored the students, so it was difficult for him to find out any information. Circaduggan sat on the grass, touching his chin with his hand. "That's how it is. Well, as a knight, you should have the spirit of the knight." He stood up, drew out his wooden sword, pointed to the sky. "Since we are both wanderers, let me take the lead. Go and get the news, and find him. You want to go out and wander around? Aren't you afraid that Professor Charles will catch you?" Hugo pouted beside him. Circaduggan said fearlessly, "A knight cannot retreat. If the truth cannot be made known to the world, then let me die on the battlefield. As long as my territory is still there, what do I have to fear?" Although he said it with great righteousness, in fact, when danger occurs, he can instantly return to his own frame. Circaduggan has successfully escaped once by this method. Professor Charles has black dragon bile, which can use magic to trap you in a painting so that you can't escape. "Are you sure you still want to go?" Hugo said. Circaduggan's fearless expression suddenly changed, but the words had already been spoken, and he couldn't take them back. He still said with face, "Don't worry, I'm not a coward. To be honest, it's not the knight's way to let me stay here as a turtle for the rest of my life." Maureen thought about it and felt that Circaduggan was indeed the best person to investigate this matter. Although he was a little crazy, he was much more familiar with the people in the painting than he was. As long as he was a little careful, nothing would happen. "Well, you have to be careful and don't get into trouble," Maureen advised. After a moment, he remembered the picture of 13 wizards eating, and said, "Maybe you can ask the 13 wizards who eat all day long. Their portraits are not far from the painting. I wonder if they will tell you. Don't worry, I have the best popularity among the portraits in the castle. Everyone welcomes me and even invites me for tea." Circaduggan said seriously. Hugo was full of doubt on the side. Chapter 138 Cacheogen Sentinel. Circaduggan left the painting fully armed. In order to disguise himself, he found a stained blue rag from somewhere and wrapped his face. He also took off his armor and put on a black tights, looking sneaky. "To be honest, you look more eye-catching like this. You have bad intentions at first glance." Hugo couldn't help but want to laugh. This guy was dressed like a thief. "Believe me, red hair, I am more experienced than you in this regard. I am a well-trained knight who stood out in the bloody battles on the battlefield. I am a hero praised by everyone. I know how to spy on intelligence." Circaduggan put on his green straw hat in an inappropriate way, and broke the wooden sword into 3 parts and stuffed it into his pocket. Once he wanted to use it, he could quickly apply some saliva and reassemble it. Maureen wanted to remind Circaduggan that there was no use holding the sword. Professor Charles would not give him the opportunity to draw the sword, but seeing Circaduggan's solemn look, he thought it was better not to interfere. "Well, my dear warriors, at this sacred moment, the great revolution has opened a new chapter, starting from when I step out of this painting. If I can't come back, please engrave on my epitaph, 'A great pioneer who died heroically for the truth.'" Circaduggan originally wanted to give a speech before leaving, but Maureen had already taken Circaduggan to the door of the public lounge, behind the fat lady's photo frame. He said, "You can leave with the help of the fat lady's portrait. I have written down those words for you. If you encounter any danger, just go back to your portrait and don't be trapped by Professor Charles. Don't worry. I will use my sword to split the darkness and bring dawn to the world. You just wait for the news of my triumphant return." Circaduggan walked to the frame of his portrait and waved to Maureen, with a look of heroic sacrifice, a look of facing death with indifference, and inexplicably a bit bleak and tragic, and then disappeared in his own photo frame. Then Maureen and the others heard the fat lady's angry voice outside. "Cadogan! You bastard, you dare to come in through the back door of my house. I told you not to set foot in this place. Ah! I won't forgive you." The sound of vases breaking rang out again. Maureen guessed that the fat lady might have thrown the vase at Circa Duggan, who was dodging in panic and shouting, "You've got the wrong person. My name is Circa Duggan, not the handsome Circa Duggan. I'm just asking for permission." Ouch! You hit my head. Maureen and Hugo looked at each other. When they were about to turn around and go back to the dormitory, Circa Duggan had reappeared in his own portrait, sitting on the grass, panting, and patting his chest. "What's wrong? You're back in just 5 minutes." Maureen asked in surprise. Hugo couldn't help but laugh and said, "Are you so useless? You are in danger of life after being hit by the vase of the fat lady." "Shut up, red hair, there's a ferocious ancient giant dog not far from that crazy woman. It wants to eat me. I have to run. You have to send me to other places. I can't go that way," Circa Duggan said angrily. "You are so troublesome," Hugo said dissatisfiedly. "Forget it." Maureen had no choice but to leave the common room, and then he saw a little husky baby barking in the portrait next to the fat lady. "Is this the ancient giant dog?" Maureen said in astonishment. "Don't look at it like this now. When it goes crazy, it will become a terrifying beast. Believe me." Circa Duggan coughed twice. "Are you afraid of everything?" Hugo said disdainfully. "What do you know? How can we treat battlefield events lightly? Well, I'm going to the battle. Dry your tears of reluctance and keep me in your hearts. If you have time to shed tears, you might as well spend it on looking forward to a better tomorrow." "We didn't cry," Hugo said impatiently. But Circa Duggan had jumped out of the frame and entered a painting of towering mountains, shouting and running forward. "I'm starting to worry about him." Maureen stuffed Circa Duggan's painting into his pocket, feeling that it was not a wise choice to let Circa Duggan go to gather intelligence. "He keeps shouting like this, and sooner or later he will be caught by Professor Charles." A week passed, and there was still no news about Pork. Principal McGonagall had held school assemblies countless times to ask everyone about Pork, but unfortunately no one knew. What gave Maureen a headache was Circa Duggan. This unreliable guy would often come back suddenly, saying with lingering fear that he was attacked by a fire dragon, chased by a giant salamander with fangs, and almost roasted by a fire-breathing flat-headed earthworm. In short, he had many weird excuses and would report his dangerous situation back to his photo frame from time to time. Sometimes, during class time, Maureen had to cast a silencing spell on Circa Duggan's portrait to prevent him from attracting too much attention. "You'll hurt me badly," Maureen said angrily. "Do you know what class I'm taking?" "Muggle Studies, Professor Charles' class." "Do you want to kill yourself?" Circa Duggan was so scared that his face turned pale. He quickly covered his mouth and hid behind the tree in his photo frame. "Why are you hiding? Get out of class is over now." Maureen poked the small tree in the painting with his finger. The tree trembled a few times and countless leaves fell down. "That's good." Circa Duggan then walked out from behind the tree in a swagger. The latest novels are first published on the 6th book bar on September 9th. "What happened this time? Bitten by a goldfish?" Hugo asked in a low voice in the corridor. "No, I found my warhorse." Circa Duggan pulled the reins hard from behind a big rock, and Maureen noticed that his horse, which had escaped from home last time, was also dragged back by Circa Duggan. "Huh? Where did you find it?" Maureen asked in surprise. "This pony who didn't like home was wandering around the North Tower last time." It was not Circa Duggan, because there was no horse in the photo frame of Circa Duggan now, so the pony couldn't come back here as Circa Duggan wanted. "The corridor on the 7th floor. My warrior, it misses me so much that it has been waiting for me to come back to it on the fertile grass on the 7th floor to restore its former glory." Before Circa Duggan finished speaking, the pony lifted its hind legs and kicked him out. "What a longing!" Maureen couldn't help laughing. Circa Duggan rolled on the ground twice and got up in a mess. Maureen then asked in confusion, "But isn't your pony in the North Tower? It was looking for grass to eat last time. There is a partition between that place and the castle, and there is no painting in the middle as a bridge. It shouldn't appear on the 7th floor." Maureen suddenly frowned. Hugo said that when he lost his memory, he was in the tower 1 second and appeared in the corridor on the 7th floor the next second. At that time, they suspected that there was a shortcut between the tower and the castle, but they did not find the passage between the two. Could it be that the pony that wandered all day found it by accident? Chapter 139 Nothing Gained. Circa Duggan, can you ask how your beloved warhorse ran back to the corridor on the 7th floor from the tower? Maybe it found a shortcut between the two. Maureen asked impatiently. Circa Duggan looked at the gray pony. The pony was about to leave the picture frame, but there were no portraits around to make it move. It looked very irritable and waved its hooves restlessly. "Okay, men, it will be happy to tell me." Circaduggan pulled the reins confidently. The pony kept digging the ground with its hooves and shook the reins hard. The rope hit Circaduggan's face. Circaduggan covered his face and grimaced. "It just likes to joke with me. This is its way of being intimate with me." Circaduggan smiled awkwardly, then leaned close to the pony and whispered, "Hey, give me some face and don't embarrass me in front of outsiders." The pony was very respectful and kicked Circaduggan out again. It just came to its new home. It needs some time to adapt. It may not be in a good mood now. Circaduggan tied the reins of the pony to a small tree to prevent it from running away from home again, and then lay on the grass panting, not wanting to get close to his warhorse. "Forget it, you haven't given us a surprise anyway." Hugo didn't have any hope for Circaduggan from the beginning. Merlin couldn't do anything. Circaduggan's rebellious warhorse was not very obedient. Even if he drove it to the painting in the North Tower, it might not run back. And Merlin couldn't be sure whether the horse really took a shortcut from the North Tower to the corridor on the 7th floor. Maybe Filch accidentally brought it here when he was moving the painting for cleaning. "Circaduggan, have you looked in Hoyle's painting these days?" Merlin asked. "No, why would I go there? That place is one of the places I least want to go." Circaduggan shook his head. "You went to gather intelligence, but you didn't go to the most important places." Hugo stretched out his finger and tickled the pony, who ran around the small tree and avoided Hugo's finger. "No one wants to go to the place where Hoyle is a nasty guy. Last time I went there, he drew a few ugly people on the wall of the community. I said that these paintings were really low quality, and his nose was crooked. He kicked me out. His temper is worse than that of my little gray." Circaduggan said. "He is a character painted by the famous wizard painter Payangard. You actually said that his paintings are ugly in front of him. Anyone would be angry." Hugo said. "Come on. Even if his creator is a genius painter, it doesn't mean he's also a genius painter. People are not allowed to tell the truth these days." Circaduggan sat up, leaned against the stone, and continued dissatisfiedly, "He was originally painted very ugly. Have you ever seen anyone with only a slit in the mouth without even a lip? Have you ever seen anyone with fangs and claws? His painting is uglier than Peeves." "Then didn't you ask other portrait painters if they saw Hoyle?" Morin asked again. Circaduggan crossed his legs. "Yes, I asked Raphael, and he scolded Hoyle for an hour in front of me, because he said that after Hoyle ran into his house 2 months ago, all the goldfish he kept died, and even he caught a bad cold and kept coughing. I also asked the dumb Girato. He swore to me that Hoyle stole his cheese, and he also cursed Hoyle with 11 dirty words." "Can a mute still curse?" Morin asked. "Hey, don't judge us with your perception." Circaduggan snorted. "He is a mute in the painting, but that doesn't mean he can't speak, understand?" Morin spread his hands, realizing that the rules in the painting are indeed different from the real world. "How bad is Hoyle's popularity?" "He is even more annoying than you," Hugo said in a fuss. "Draw your sword. Little red hair." Circaduggan quickly took out 3 broken swords from his pocket, glued them together with saliva, and waved them at Hugo angrily, intending to duel with Hugo to defend his dignity. "Next time you go out for reconnaissance, ask those people in the painting if they have seen Hoyle recently. His unpopularity is his problem. The important thing is that he may have mastered Professor Charles' secret. We need Hoyle. Have you forgotten who destroyed your original painting?" Morin felt it necessary to emphasize this matter to Circaduggan. After all, Circaduggan himself said that he almost fell into the hands of Professor Charles last time, and Circaduggan needed to let go of his prejudice against Hoyle. Circaduggan glared at Hugo fiercely, then put away his sword and nodded reluctantly. After a moment, he asked Maureen to help look after his warhorse, then jumped into a picture of furniture and continued his work. Let's not count on him. Hugo felt very bad as he watched Circaduggan charging into battle. He is the only person in the painting who can help us. Apart from him and the fat lady, few people in the painting are willing to talk to us. Maureen put the reduced painting into his school bag. The pony neighed unhappily, but he didn't care. At dinner, Hugo was going to participate in the activities of the Wizard Chess Club and did not come to eat with Maureen. Maureen went to the hall alone and met Philia. Quidditch training at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We need to adjust the tactics again in the absence of James and Albus. You can talk to Lily and Sweet by the way. Philia ran over to inform Maureen. Okay, Philia, I know. Maureen nodded. The latest novel is published on the 69th book bar. There is no news from poker, but the Quidditch game is still going on. James and Albus are recovering from their arms. According to their current conditions, they may not be able to play in the next game against Ravenclaw. James and Albus spent a lot of money to beat Slytherin, and they will have to bear the consequences in the next game. The next afternoon, everyone was there, even James and Albus came. This is why poker doesn't let us use this tactic. There is no other way. Come on. James and Albus watched every training on the Quidditch field. They were responsible for teaching Sweet and Lily how to become beaters and how to change the direction of the bludger with the least effort. Fortunately, Sweet has now become a rising star in Gryffindor. His flying skills are also very first class, so it is not a big problem to replace the beater. Maybe we can beat Ravenclaw. To be honest, I think we are quite strong, Albus said very pertinently. But in fact, without James, Albus and poker, three main players, Owen and Diana are not good at finding the position of the ball players. Their offensive formation is very weak. After repeated consideration, they can only shift the focus of training to a more defensive method. At the end of Thursday's training, everyone was very tired. When Maureen was about to return to the castle, Sweet stopped him. I think I found some clues, Sweet said calmly. Chapter 140 The Trapped Knight. What clues did you find? Maureen asked in surprise. There's something wrong with the classroom on the 7th floor corridor. I don't think it's what we usually see, Sweet said in a deep voice. What does that mean? That classroom seems to change, Sweet said uncertainly. Change? Maureen was even more confused. Are you saying that the classroom is the room of requirement? If the classroom on the 7th floor was transformed from the room of requirement, then it would indeed explain why Maureen didn't see anyone when he followed Jamie to the classroom last time. The room of requirement can do this for people. But Maureen has confirmed that the classroom on the 7th floor is not the room of requirement, because he also suspected so at the beginning, and he even tried it for this purpose. However, what he thought in his mind did not come true, which is easy to distinguish. But Sweet shook his head. No, I don't know how to explain it. There is a very strange atmosphere in that classroom, which is not real, Sweet said. How did you see it? Maureen asked. Intuition. Intuition. Maureen looked at Sweet in confusion. Sweet turned around with the flying broom, put the broom back into the broom closet, and walked towards the stairs. Come with me to that classroom. Sweet turned up the stairs, and Maureen followed behind. They passed through the bustling crowd and came to the corridor on the 7th floor. There were not many students here, and it seemed very deserted compared to other places. Maureen stared at the portraits in the corridor again. Sure enough, these portraits had been replaced again at some point. It's really weird. Maureen couldn't understand why someone would often replace the paintings in the corridor on the 7th floor. What was the purpose of doing this? Sweet had already walked to the classroom, opened the door of the classroom, and walked in. This classroom has changed again. Sweet frowned. How did you tell if the classroom has changed? Maureen looked around. The dirty words written by Peeves on the blackboard had not been wiped off. Everything was arranged exactly the same as when Maureen came a few days ago. There is a special smell. I don't know what it is, but I have come here 4 times in the past few days. The smell I smelled was different twice. Although the layout of the classroom is the same every time I come, my intuition tells me that something has changed in this classroom. Sweet walked to the wall and stared at a painting on the wall. You have a good nose, Maureen said, but then he thought of it again. The last time Hugo came here, he also said that he felt some strange smell, but he couldn't tell what it was. Is it the same for Sweet and Hugo? Maureen focused his eyes on the painting closest to the door. There was a group of women wrapped in bathrobes in this painting. When Sir Cadogan ran in, he was driven out, but this time, Maureen's pupils shrank slightly. It was replaced by Paingard's painting. This painting, how did it get here? Maureen looked at Paingard's painting in surprise. He was too impressed by this painting, not only because some people in the painting moved and some did not, but also because there was a person peeping at him in this painting last time. Is this painting important? Sweet didn't seem to recognize the painting. Maureen simply told Sweet about the painting. Sweet's eyes moved and he seemed to be thinking about something. Paingard, I heard that he is not a simple person, Sweet said thoughtfully. Of course he is not simple. It is not that simple to draw a moving and emotionless person on a piece of paper at the same time. Maureen looked at this painting of Pingade. The people and wizards in it were no different from the original ones. The wizards on the street were walking, and the muggles were standing there stupidly. The houses were scattered in an orderly manner. Some were multi-story apartment buildings, and some were small villas. It seemed that muggles and wizards lived in the same community, happy and harmonious. The theme of all Pingade's paintings was about how muggles and wizards can live in harmony, which was also vividly reflected in this painting. But how did this painting come to this classroom? Maureen was puzzled. If Professor Charles wanted to lure Hoyle, he should have left the painting in its original place. Why did he leave it here? Wait for me here. I'll go upstairs to call Sir Cadogan. He's the person in the painting. Maybe he knows something. Maureen didn't know how to appreciate paintings. He wanted Sir Cadogan to help check the painting. The Gryffindor common room was on the 8th floor. Maureen was doing Quidditch training in the afternoon. He left his school bag and wand in his dormitory. Sir Cadogan's photo frame was in his school bag. He left the classroom and walked down the stairs to the Gryffindor common room. He found his school bag and wand in his dormitory and took out Sir Cadogan's photo frame. But Sir Cadogan was not on the frame. Only his pony was there, looking unhappy and angry. Sir Cadogan? Come back soon. I have something to talk to you about. Maureen shouted at the photo frame. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. He knew that Sir Cadogan was wandering around the castle, but as long as he shouted at the photo frame, no matter where Sir Cadogan ran to, he would be able to hear him and run back immediately. But Sir Cadogan did not appear, instead only the voice came back from his photo frame. Save me, dear warrior, I am trapped and can't go back. Sir Cadogan's voice sounded very panicked. You are trapped? Where are you trapped? Maureen was surprised. I don't know. I've been calling you for an hour. You didn't come to save me. I remember that I ran to the corridor on the 7th floor, talked to Ricky who was riding a broomstick to the moon, then went to see how Tom and Jerry were quarreling, then went to Topsy's house as a guest, drank some milk tea, and helped old Tim weed. Can you tell me the point? Oh yes, then I wanted to go to Hoyle's house, but Gladstone, who had the best relationship with me among the 13 wizards who had the Last Supper, told me that Charles had moved Hoyle's paintings away while everyone was asleep last night. It happened that when Gladstone got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, he saw that Hoyle's house had been moved to the classroom in the corridor on the 7th floor, so I rushed there without hesitation, and then jumped into the Sodalin Canyon, and then I got lost and couldn't get out. Sir Cadogan talked a lot of nonsense, and finally said something useful at the end. Something that could trap the person in the painting immediately reminded Maureen of Professor Charles's black gentian. Professor Charles used black gentian to deal with Hoyle. It seemed that Sir Cadogan had stumbled into a trap by mistake. Where is the Sodalin Canyon? Maureen asked. In the North Tower. The North Tower is right next to my original territory. Sir Cadogan said hurriedly. Aren't you on the 7th floor? Why did you run to the North Tower? I want to know, too. I was scouting on the 7th floor, walking along the Grand Canyon, and when I looked up, I found myself in the North Tower. Sir Cadogan said innocently. Wait for me there, be careful, find a place to hide, I'll be there soon. Maureen felt that something was going to happen. He quickly stuffed Sir Cadogan's photo frame into his pocket and ran out of the dormitory. Chapter 141 24 hours ago. Maureen went down to the corridor on the 7th floor first. He had to explain the situation to Sweet first, and then go to look for Sir Cadogan. When he ran back to the original classroom, Sweet was sitting on a chair on the side. Sir Cadogan is trapped in a painting. Professor Charles prevented him from leaving. I must go to save him first. Maureen said. Trapped in a painting? How could that knight be trapped in a painting? Sweet was a little surprised. This matter is very troublesome to explain. I will tell you in detail on the way. He is now in the North Tower. Maureen said and left the classroom and ran towards the North Tower. However, at this moment, something strange happened. All the scenes in front of him began to flow, and everything around him quickly retreated. The shadows of the traffic flashed in front of Maureen's eyes. How could it be? Maureen was shocked. He already knew what was going on. Back to the past. Back to the past again. Maureen didn't expect that he would go back to the past at this time. He hadn't experienced this for a long time since Lily and Sweet lost their memories last semester. Now the same thing happened to him again. 1 hour, where was I an hour ago? Maureen recalled quickly in his mind. An hour ago? He was training with other players on the Quidditch field. If he went back an hour ago, he would be able to stop Circuduggan from going to the painting of the Sodalin Grand Canyon before he was trapped. The scene of light and land around him soon began to stabilize. Maureen expected that he should ride a flying broom on the Quidditch field, but when he saw the situation clearly, he found himself sitting in the castle hall. He didn't react for a while. Why was he sitting in the hall on the first floor, eating with a knife and fork in his hand? This was not an hour ago, so when was it? Tomorrow at 4 p.m., Quidditch field. We need to adjust the tactics again in the absence of James and Albus. You can talk to Lily and Sweet by the way. Filia ran over and patted Maureen on the shoulder and said, "Huh?" Maureen was stunned for a moment. Filia came to find him for training. Isn't this? Maureen suddenly realized what time he was in now. 24 hours. Maureen was surprised. How did I go back to 24 hours ago? What 24 hours? Why do you look absent-minded? Are you okay, Maureen? Filia looked at Maureen worriedly. Now that Poker was missing and James and Albus were absent, if Maureen got into trouble again, the Gryffindor team would basically be finished. I'm fine, Filia. Maureen came to his senses and said quickly, I will inform Lily and Sweet. See you tomorrow at the Quidditch field. Okay, see you tomorrow. Filia made sure that Maureen was fine again and again before leaving. Maureen put down his knife and fork without hesitation, picked up toy from the dining table, pulled up his school bag and ran out of the hall. This matter was really too strange. He did not go back an hour ago this time, but directly went back 24 hours ago. If Filia hadn't come to inform him, he wouldn't even be able to confirm this. Maureen suddenly felt uneasy. What is going on? Why is this time so special? Who is missing this time? Maureen lowered his head and thought. He remembered what Circuduggan said. Circuduggan said that Gladstone saw Professor Charles move Pienget's painting to the classroom in the corridor on the 7th floor last night. Doesn't that mean that this is what will happen tonight? He immediately ran up the stairs quickly and headed for the corridor on the 7th floor. At this time, most of the students in the castle were having dinner in the hall on the 1st floor. Maureen didn't meet anyone else along the way. He raised his head on the landing of the stairs and looked at the wall opposite the stairs. Pienget's painting is not here. Not there. Maureen was surprised. If he went back to 24 hours ago, then Pienget's painting should not have been moved yet. Maureen came to the 7th floor and ran towards the weird classroom. After opening the classroom, the stale smell of abandoned tables and chairs came to his nose again. He glanced at the wall next to the classroom door. The painting of Pienget was already hanging on the wall. Strange, shouldn't this painting be hung here in the middle of the night? Why is it moved here now? Maureen left the classroom and looked at the 13 Wizards, the Last Supper painting from a distance on the fence of the corridor on the 7th floor. Then he took out the photo frame of Circuduggan from his school bag. Circuduggan was not on the photo frame at this time. Only the pony was lying on the ground sleeping. Circuduggan, are you okay? Come back. Maureen shouted. What's wrong? What do you want to talk to me about? I'm helping an old lady cross the street in Godric's Hollow. Circuduggan ran in from the edge of the photo frame and asked with a relaxed look on his face. Fortunately, you are not trapped in the Sodalin Grand Canyon. Maureen breathed a sigh of relief. The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. What do you mean by being trapped in the Sodalin Canyon? What are you talking about? How can the Sodalin Canyon trap me? Circuduggan walked to the pony, touched the pony's head, and asked in confusion. Nothing. By the way, the painting of Pienget has been moved away, didn't you notice? Maureen pointed to the opposite wall and turned Circuduggan's photo frame towards that side. Circuduggan squinted his eyes and looked at it, then said, Huh? Strange, Hoyle's home is gone? Didn't Professor Charles couldn't help but snap him? No, it was moved to that classroom. Don't worry about this for now. Come with me to see the painting and see if you can find anything in it. Maureen urged. Okay, it's a small matter. I heard that Hoyle is not at home, so I can play in his painting without restraint. Oh, this is the Sodalin Canyon. Circuduggan looked around and found that there was a picture of the Grand Canyon behind him. He jumped out. Is that the Sodalin Canyon? Wait, don't go into that painting. Maureen shouted. But it was too late. Circuduggan appeared on the bank of the Grand Canyon. In the middle of the canyon was a rushing river. If you get close, you can hear the roar of the flowing water. Why can't I go in here? It's okay. I've been to the Sodalin Canyon many times. I'm just passing through. Circaduggan jumped to the other side of the Grand Canyon nonchalantly. His jumping ability seemed to be very good. He jumped directly to the edge of the picture frame on the other side. Bang! Circaduggan screamed and hit the edge of the picture frame. He fell from the air with a snap, and then screamed in horror and fell into the turbulent river below the canyon. Help! Why can't I go back? Help me! Circaduggan shouted in panic, trying to return to his own picture frame instantly, but he couldn't do it. In the blink of an eye, he was washed away by the turbulent river of the Grand Canyon. Maureen was completely confused. Who could have thought that Circaduggan would be trapped at this time? Chapter 142 The Passage in the Painting. Are you okay? Maureen shouted towards the turbulent river in the Sodalin Canyon. I'm in trouble. Circaduggan's voice came from his photo frame, and there was the sound of rushing water around him. I can't climb up. The water is too turbulent. I don't know where it will flow. The sound of the rushing water was mixed with the sound of Circaduggan constantly floundering in the water. It sounded particularly strange coming from the photo frame. The pony seemed to have heard Circaduggan shouting and yelling, and even huffed twice in dissatisfaction. I just told you that you will be trapped in the Sodalin Canyon. Now try to grab some protruding rocks or branches. Maybe when you are washed to a place where the water is stable, you should be able to stop. Maureen looked at the painting in front of him. If Circaduggan could not return to his photo frame instantly from this painting, then the surroundings of this painting must be smeared with black gentian bile, which could trap the person in the painting. I don't know. I've never fallen into the water before. Circaduggan was very annoyed. Have you climbed ashore now? Maureen could no longer see Circaduggan in the painting. No, this damn water flow won't stop. No. How did I get washed here? Circaduggan's doubtful voice sounded in the frame. Where did you get washed to? North Tower. This is a friendly country in my original territory. I can see the spiral staircase. Why is the downstream of the river the upstream of another painting? These two paintings are connected. What bad luck. How come there is also a Sorrento Canyon here? I'm going to fall again. Circaduggan shouted, and his voice was drowned by the rolling waves again. The two paintings are connected? You mean the two paintings on the North Tower and the 7th floor are connected? Maureen was surprised. He looked at the pony tied to the tree in his hand. So Circaduggan's hypocritical pony came here from the North Tower in this way? Before he was sure of this, he saw Circaduggan struggling in the river in the waves of the upper reaches of this Sorrento Canyon. Circaduggan was washed downstream just now. How can the lower reaches of this Sorrento Canyon be the upper reaches of this painting? Circaduggan shouted and rushed from the upper reaches of the canyon to the lower reaches. Then a very strange scene appeared. Circaduggan was constantly carried from the upper reaches to the lower reaches by the surging water, and the lower reaches seemed to be the upper reaches of the Grand Canyon painting in the North Tower. He rushed from the upper reaches of that painting to the lower reaches, and came to the upper reaches of this painting. Over and over again, back and forth, even Maureen was helpless. You won't be drowned, will you? Maureen asked uncertainly. The mutes in the paintings can speak, and the sailors who conquer the sea can survive after being eaten by sharks. He thought that the water in the Grand Canyon would not kill Circaduggan. No, but it's good that it won't. You just bear with it. I can't get rid of the black gentian bile. I can only wait for it to lose its effect. I'll go to the North Tower to see the situation first. Then how long will I drift like this? It depends on the situation of the smear. If I'm lucky, 2 or 3 hours. What if I'm unlucky? You'd better pray for good luck. Maureen had already run quickly towards the North Tower. It took him more than 10 minutes to hurriedly cross a corridor and come to a platform in the North Tower. This was originally the place where Circaduggan's portrait was located, but now another painting has been hung, which is the Soto Blue Grand Canyon, which is exactly the same as the corridor on the 7th floor. Oh, I see your feet. Why are your feet facing the sky? Maureen asked. Gulp gurp gurp. Circaduggan seemed to want to respond to Maureen, but he drank a big mouthful of water. Bang! Circaduggan hit a protruding rock, then flew out, turned 720 degrees in the air, and fell into the water again, splashing a large wave, which made Maureen feel painful. What's wrong with that damn painter? He painted such a large reef in the middle of the river. I almost got dizzy. Circaduggan cursed. The water was too fast and he couldn't control his body. He just went with the flow. But he didn't seem to be hurt by the rock. He was thick-skinned and reassuring. Maureen was helpless and could only look at Sir Cadogan with sympathy. He couldn't help anything about the things in the painting. But he still couldn't figure out what was so strange about this place. Why were there two identical paintings in the Sutherland Grand Canyon? Was it just to connect the corridors of the North Tower and the 7th floor? Maureen walked up the stairs of the North Tower. The distribution of paintings here was different from when Maureen first came. When he turned a corner, he looked up at the wall above and was suddenly stunned. A painting by P.I.N.A.D. Maureen was very familiar with this painting. Although the place where it was hung was surrounded by many dazzling paintings, Maureen still found it among these paintings at a glance. The latest novels are first published on the 69th floor of the book bar. How did P.I.N.A.'s painting get moved from the corridor on the 7th floor to this place? Maureen frowned. This was really weird. He had just seen this painting in the classroom on the 7th floor of the castle, but when he ran to the North Tower here, he actually saw another painting by P.I.N.A.D. Have all the paintings in the castle been copied? Maureen was puzzled. Sir Cadogan was walking back and forth between two identical paintings of the Grand Canyon. Did P.N.G. also have two identical paintings? The painting of P.N.G. was hung nearly 4 meters from the ground, and it was difficult for ordinary students to touch it. There were some other paintings around it, such as a painting of a Quidditch match, where countless people flew around on flying broomsticks, and there were also pictures of majestic purple dragons, phoenixes with bright golden feathers, and other magical animals. There was also a painting of the Battle of Hogwarts, which seemed to commemorate the fierce battle 21 years ago. Sir Cadogan's voice came from the photo frame in Maureen's hand again. This time he was rushed to the canyon on the 7th floor. Hey, little red hair, what are you doing here? And the little girl from the Potter family, oh, it's so lively, are the first grade students lining up? Ah. Sir Cadogan suddenly stopped talking and didn't make any more sounds. What's wrong? Are you drowned again? Maureen asked curiously. After about 10 seconds, Sir Cadogan seemed to be washed over here from the Grand Canyon over there, and then he whispered, I saw little red hair, the little girl from the Potter family, and other people whose names I can't remember, and Charles. What? Professor Charles? Hugo and Lily are with Professor Charles. Maureen was a little surprised and continued to ask, what's Hugo's expression? Why is he with Professor Charles? I don't know. That little red hair looks stupid, not at all like usual, although he usually looks stupid too. Oh, by the way, it's over there in the corridor on the 7th floor. I just saw them turn a corner and should be heading towards that classroom. Sir Cadogan was very afraid of Professor Charles and spoke very quietly. His voice was mixed with the waves, and Maureen could only barely hear what he was saying. The corridor on the 7th floor. Maureen had formed a conditioned reflex to this place, and he ran back without hesitation. He remembered that Hugo should be attending the activities of the Wizard Chess Club at this time, and he should have dinner there, instead of following Professor Charles to hang out in the corridor on the 7th floor. Usually, he would go back to an hour ago, but this time he went back to a day ago. Now Hugo and the others were with Professor Charles again. Could it be that? Maureen quickened his pace. He had to figure this out. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143 Professor Charles. Maureen rushed back from the North Tower to the classroom on the 7th floor. He was ready to face Professor Charles, but when he pushed open the door, he found that the classroom was empty, without a single person. Sir Cadogan, how many people did they just walk past? Maureen took out the photo frame and asked Sir Cadogan, who was floating between the Grand Canyon on the 7th floor and the North Tower. I don't know, about 6 or 7? I didn't see clearly, and if you were like me, you wouldn't be able to see clearly. Sir Cadogan's voice came from the photo frame. His voice sounded like he had given up struggling, and he spit out a few mouthfuls of water from time to time, and the sound of po was endless. Maureen opened the door and searched the entire classroom, but found nothing unusual. The positions of all the things were exactly the same as before, without any deviation, and there was no sign of anyone coming in. The painting of P.I.N.A.D. was still hanging in its original position. It seemed that there were indeed two identical paintings, one hanging in this classroom and one hanging in the North Tower. It was just that no one knew which one was the real one. Circa Duggan, you keep an eye on me here now. Notify me immediately if anything happens. Maureen said to Circa Duggan, who was drifting with the flow. Circa Duggan had a sad face. In fact, he was more afraid that he would be discovered by Professor Charles and burned to death. Do you really have the heart to let me drift here? I might catch a cold. No, you won't. I might be eaten by a shark. No, you won't. I might go crazy. No, you won't. Maureen hurried back to the Gryffindor common room. He wanted to find Hugo and Lily to make sure whether they were still there. Lily is not here. She was doing her homework for the potion class with me just now. Suddenly, she left without saying a word. I was wondering. Gemma, who shared a dormitory with Lily, was doing her homework in the corner of the common room. A book Transfiguration Theory was spread out on her desk. When she heard Maureen's question, she put down her pen and blushed slightly. Then did you see Hugo, Sweet, or Jamie? Maureen asked anxiously. Jamie, oh yes, I did see Jamie leaving the common room with Lily just now. As for Hugo and Sweet, I don't know. I didn't see them. Gemma replied. Maureen's heart skipped a beat. Whether it was Hugo, Lily or Jamie, they were all among the missing people. This time, Maureen strangely returned to the present from 24 hours later. He had been wondering who the missing person would be, but because the time he returned to the past was beyond the previous range, he felt that something unusual was about to happen. Thank you for telling me this, Gemma. You're welcome, Maureen. Oh, you performed really well that day, Gemma said with a blushing face. Maureen was in a hurry to find someone, and he didn't hear clearly what Gemma said. He opened the door of Gryffindor again and ran to the library. Sweet was also one of the people with the mark on his back last time. He wanted to know if Sweet was missing as well. At this time of the year, Sweet usually stayed in the library to read books and do homework. He could confirm it by just looking there. Maureen ran down the stairs to the library on the 5th floor. In order to save time, he ran very fast, but just as he jumped over a step that could disappear at any time, he suddenly bumped into someone's arms. Good evening, Walker, it's dangerous for you to rush so fast. A gentle voice came from in front of Maureen. Professor Charles. Maureen was startled. Circa Duggan said that he saw Professor Charles going to the classroom on the 7th floor just now, and now he appeared here again. Maureen's heart was beating fast. He was just thinking about how to investigate Professor Charles, but he didn't expect Professor Charles to appear here. It was really weird. But Maureen calmed down quickly. I'm sorry, Professor Charles, I need to go to the library, you know, to borrow some books so that I can write the paper you assigned me last time, The Function of Muggle Refrigerators. Maureen immediately put away her doubtful look and said in a very relaxed tone. Reading is a good thing, but be careful when walking, it's not good to bump into people. Professor Charles wore a brown suit at night, and his face was less gentle and elegant than usual, but he looked a little impatient, but he tried his best to cover it up and make himself look normal, but Maureen could still tell. This made Maureen more certain that Professor Charles was up to something. Yes, Professor, I'm sorry to bump into you, I will be careful, then I'll leave first, bye. This time, Maureen was no longer in a hurry to leave, but walked down the stairs slowly. Professor Charles kept looking at Maureen's back, and when Maureen's back disappeared at the corner of the 5th floor, he strode up the stairs and continued to walk up. But Professor Charles didn't go far. Maureen poked her head out from the fence on the 5th floor again and followed Professor Charles along the stairs. He just went to the 7th floor and now he's here again. Maybe he went back to get something. This is the perfect time. Maureen had a lot of questions in his mind, but since he had found Professor Charles, he had to investigate the matter thoroughly. The latest novels are published on the 6th floor of the book bar. He quietly walked up to the staircase platform on the 6th floor and looked up to see Professor Charles' feet disappear at the staircase on the 6th floor. Maureen waited for a moment and then bent down to follow him. Hey, Maureen. Along the way, he met two Gryffindor classmates who greeted him. He also responded politely in a low voice, fearing that Professor Charles would notice him. He thought that he should always carry James's disguise hat with him so that he would not be recognized. Then he also heard that Professor Charles seemed to have met two students. Yes, Boone, next week your second-year students will hand in Muggle banquet etiquette. I suggest you go to the library to look up some information. Sorry, I have something else to deal with, so let's not talk for now. Professor Charles' voice sounded a little hurried. Maureen continued to walk up. The two students did not come down. They were going back to the lounge on the 8th floor from the 6th floor. Fortunately, Maureen did not run into them, otherwise she might have to say hello again. With the help of the handrails on both sides of the stairs, Maureen saw Professor Charles walking along the corridor on the 7th floor. When he came to the Sutherland Grand Canyon, his eyes stayed on the canyon for a while, but he did not stop to check the painting. The gentle expression on Professor Charles' face had disappeared. He walked hurriedly and looked around from time to time, trying to see if anyone noticed him. However, few students would come to the 7th floor at this time, and he did not notice Maureen behind him. Maureen followed behind, and when he passed by the Sutherland Canyon on the wall again, Circa Duggan saw him and shouted in a very low voice, "Dear warrior, come and save me. Charles has walked past here twice in a row. He just glanced at me and I was scared. I don't have time now, you drift for a while." Maureen said softly, stuffed Circa Duggan's picture frame into his pocket, and then took out his wand, always on guard. Professor Charles had turned the corner of the corridor on the 7th floor and disappeared. Maureen also turned around and squatted behind the armor. Through the gap in the armor, he saw Professor Charles. Professor Charles stopped in front of the classroom. He looked left and right to make sure that no one was passing by here. Then he took out a rolled canvas from his pocket. The canvas was white and very new, as if it had just been bought not long ago. He touched the canvas with his wand, and the canvas suddenly became larger, as wide as the entire door. Professor Charles spread out the canvas, which was blank and had nothing painted on it. What is he doing with this canvas? Maureen looked at all this in confusion, and tried to keep his breathing low. At this time, perhaps because he was too bored, the armor in front of Maureen suddenly creaked, which scared him, and Professor Charles had already turned his head. Chapter 144 The Door in the Painting. The armor placed in the corridor of the castle often moves to prove its presence, which every student is used to. But the random movement at this time is a bolt from the blue for Maureen. Maureen has tried to shrink his body as much as possible. Fortunately, he is only 11 years old and has a small body, which is more than enough to hide behind the armor. Fortunately, Professor Charles seems to know that the armor here often moves around, so he didn't think much about it and quickly retracted his gaze, which made Maureen relieved. Professor Charles waved his wand, and the brand new canvas was quickly attached to the door frame. Then Maureen saw a magical scene. When the blank canvas was attached to the door, a little ink suddenly appeared from the center of the canvas. These inks seemed to have their own consciousness, automatically outlining some lines, intertwining and changing colors. In just a blink of an eye, a door appeared on the canvas. The strangest thing is that the door that appeared in the canvas is exactly the same as the door of the original classroom on the 7th floor. Even the wall plaster that fell off next to the door frame is exactly the same. If Maureen hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have noticed that there was a piece of canvas here. The door on this canvas can almost be regarded as a real door. Maureen felt that this kind of canvas was a little familiar, and then suddenly realized that she had seen this strange canvas before. By the way, Peeves. Maureen still remembered that when she had just entered school last semester, James and Albus said they were going to declare war on Peeves and went to a classroom. At that time, Peeves hung a large magic canvas in the middle of the classroom to deal with James and Albus. That was also the first time Maureen went back to the past. If he hadn't predicted all this and asked James and Albus to change their prank plan in time, perhaps they would have been teased by Peeves. And the canvas used by Professor Charles is obviously also a magic canvas that can transform the scene behind it and achieve a real-life scene. What are you going to do with this canvas, Professor Charles? Just to create a fake door. Maureen stared closely at Professor Charles's movements, not daring to blink, for fear of missing out on something crucial. Professor Charles extended his wand again, knocked on the door handle of the canvas, and whispered, "Dolph in Motau." The door handle of the canvas trembled slightly, and then a strange ripple spread from the canvas, and Professor Charles had already grasped the door handle and opened the door on the canvas. How could it be? Isn't the thing on the magic canvas fake? Maureen was surprised to see Professor Charles open the door on the canvas, and then he looked around to make sure no one noticed him. Then he walked in and gently closed the door. Maureen immediately stood up and tiptoed towards the classroom. He carefully touched the door on the magic canvas. The door on the canvas didn't feel like a fake door at all. Whether it was the cold temperature of the door frame or the uneven pattern, it showed that it was a real door. His fingers touched the edge of the canvas. He had to touch it very carefully to barely touch the invisible borderline of the canvas. This also made Maureen confirm that it was just a door touched by the magic of the canvas, not a real door. Maureen slowly turned the door handle and opened a tiny crack in the door. He leaned over to check the situation inside. He wanted to know what the door formed by the magic canvas would turn the original classroom into. A familiar stale smell came over. How could it be? Maureen opened his eyes wide in surprise. Why is it still the original classroom? Maureen was very puzzled. Professor Charles had clearly entered through the door on the magic canvas just now. Why did Professor Charles disappear in this classroom in front of Maureen? This was not the first time someone disappeared in front of Maureen. The last time he came with Jamie and Sweet, they also disappeared directly in this classroom. Although Maureen went back to the past and the same thing did not happen again, it still made him feel strange. Maureen did not believe it. He walked into the classroom and looked carefully. The scene around him remained unchanged. The chairs were covered with dust, the blackboard was covered with beeves-like swear words, some parchment lay in the wastebasket on the ground, and the painting of Piangad was still hanging on the wall. Maureen fell into deep thought, and at this moment, he set his eyes on the painting of Piangad, and he saw an even more surprising scene. Professor Charles just now appeared in Piangad's painting. Maureen almost couldn't believe his eyes. What was going on? Did Professor Charles also draw his own portrait? Why did he appear in Piangad's painting? Is this Professor Charles the real person or a person drawn? Professor Charles in the painting was wearing a brown suit, exactly the same as the one that Maureen had just seen. He was walking on the street where wizards and muggles coexisted, looking around, then passing an old muggle man sitting on a chair on the street reading a newspaper, and then passing a witch riding a flying broom to sell cherries on the roadside, and then ran towards a red house in the community and disappeared into the house. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. This house is a villa. Maureen remembers it very clearly, because last time he saw someone peeping at him in the attic of this house. This feeling is really too strange. Professor Charles seems to have become a member of the painting, and he is also a wizard who walks around in the painting. If this is Professor Charles himself, then how did he do it? How did Professor Charles disappear? How did Jamie and Sweet disappear? Maureen suddenly remembered the door he encountered when he went from the basement kitchen to Hogsmeade Village. Many doors in the wizarding world have their own magic and ways of opening. For example, the entrance to the basement kitchen requires scratching the pear, and the room of requirement requires thinking about what you need before opening the door. So the way to open this door in front of you is probably, he immediately left the classroom, then took a deep breath, looked at the fake door in front of him, took out his wand, gently knocked on the door handle, and chanted the spell that Professor Charles had just chanted, Dolph in Motau. A ripple spread from the door handle, and a different breath came from the crack of the door. This time Maureen felt that he used the right way to open the door. Maureen gently turned the door handle and opened the door. What came into view was no longer the classroom with a stale smell, but a vast white mist. Chapter 145 The World in the Painting. The white mist covered the sky and there seemed to be some lush trees around. This scene seemed familiar. That's right. It's a memory. Maureen woke up. When Hugo disappeared, he seemed to see Hugo's lost memory when he touched the mark on Hugo's back. When Hugo opened this door, he entered a white mist. Not only Hugo, but also Sweet and Jamie's memories, their memories came to an abrupt end in this mist. At that time, he thought these people went to the Forbidden Forest outside the castle, but now it seems that this is not the case. So they all walked here through this door. Maureen clenched the wand in his hand, always alert to the surroundings, fearing that something would rush over. In the past, when he saw this mist, it was from other people's memories. This time Maureen came here in person, and he couldn't help feeling a little nervous. Some huge trees could be vaguely seen in the mist. Maureen walked forward for about a minute, and the mist in front of him began to gradually dissipate. He saw the exit in front of him. When he walked out of the mist, he found himself on a street. There were people walking around on the street, some of them moving, some not. From time to time, wizards rode brooms and sped past in the sky. He came to Piangard's painting. Maureen turned his head and looked behind him, and found that there was an entrance to a park behind him. There were some trees growing in the park. He had just walked in through the park. Not only that, when he turned around, he found a very strange phenomenon. He could actually see the scene of the classroom on the 7th floor corridor of Hogwarts Castle clearly. This scene was very strange. as if the sky behind him had cracked a big square hole, and the tables, chairs and blackboards in the classroom were all presented in this big square hole. And the big square hole was surrounded by a white fog, and nothing could be seen clearly. Is this where the people in the paintings usually live? So this is how they look at us outside the paintings. Maureen looked at the square opening. Usually they were outside looking at things in the paintings, but now they suddenly came into painting and felt particularly novel. As a person born in a wizard family, he was already accustomed to the moving wizard paintings, but he had no idea how the people in the paintings looked at the people outside the paintings. But even if he was born in a wizard family, this was the first time Maureen heard that someone could walk into a painting. He looked around again and found that the world in the painting was not complete. Only the buildings in the paintings could be seen, but many parts that were not drawn in the paintings were covered by a large area of white fog, just like when he came in just now. However, this painting of Paingard was a map of a community, so it was still very detailed. The houses on both sides of the street were scattered. After Maureen came in, his body became able to adapt to the size of the houses, and walking on the street was no different from other people. "Big brother, do you want to buy a bunch of carnations? Carnations that change color. They are very beautiful." A little girl of 4 or 5 years old came towards Maureen and asked with her innocent big eyes. She held a large bunch of carnations in her hands. The carnations slowly changed from white to pink and then to purple, and finally turned into golden color. It looked like a bunch of sunshine, which was very stunning. "Oh no, thank you, I don't have any money." Maureen looked at the little girl in front of him. The little girl's body looked very real, and even her curved eyelashes were clearly visible. If Maureen didn't know that he had entered a world of paintings, he would probably think that he saw a real little girl. "Then I will give you this bunch of red carnations. Goodbye, big brother." The little girl smiled and handed a fiery red carnation to Maureen. The carnation was like a bunch of flames in the breeze, and the flowers trembled gently, as if burning. Maureen held a red carnation in his hand. This carnation that looked like a flame had turned into gold, and it looked particularly real in his hand. He couldn't help wondering if he had become the person in the painting, or if the people in the painting were originally from another real world. Maybe the people in the painting are the same to themselves as the people outside are painting. Maureen thought to himself that wizards and muggles live in their own world and regard the people in the painting as fake. But the people in the painting also live in their world. Maybe the people in the painting also regard the real world where Maureen and his friends live as fake. True and false are originally relative. It depends on the angle from which you look at it. He couldn't bear to reject the little girl's kindness, so he put the bouquet of carnations in his pocket. He remembered that he didn't come to the painting to go shopping, but to find Professor Charles and Hugo and others. He quickly looked around on the street and saw an old Muggle man sitting on the street in the distance reading a newspaper. Maureen ran towards the old Muggle man, and he also stopped to check on the old Muggle man who couldn't move. This Muggle old man looked like a real person, whether it was his gray hair, his wrinkles, or his loose short sleeves, they were all real. Maureen poked the old man's hand with his finger and found that the skin on his hand would sink and recover, and even his skin was warm. The only difference was that he would not move, and he did not breathe, but he opened his eyes, wore reading glasses, and read the newspaper. The front page of the newspaper read "Industrial Reform Promotes Capitalism" and other very boring Muggle content. Maureen had no interest in this kind of thing. "It feels like I was cast a spell of immobilization." Maureen couldn't help but admire it, but in fact, people who were cast a spell of immobilization would still breathe, and this Muggle old man was more like a living statue. There was a witch on the street next to him riding a flying broom. Under the flying broom was a large basket full of cherries, which was selling. Maureen walked around the witch and ran towards the red house where Professor Charles had just disappeared. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. This red house is a small villa. Maureen stood outside the house and looked at it. Professor Charles disappeared here just now. Last time when Maureen was appraising paintings in the castle, he also saw the man in the painting who was peeping at him in the attic above. It doesn't seem wise to run up from the front door like this. Maureen thought that if he met Professor Charles, he might not even have the chance to run. He must take the opportunity to sneak into this house and wait for an opportunity to act. At this time, a man with a big slug walked over leisurely, as if he was taking a walk. Maureen asked hurriedly, "Excuse me, is this house Hoyle's?" "Oh. You mean this house? It's Hoyle's house. Where are you from? It doesn't belong to our community, right?" The man walking the slug asked very comfortably. It was probably because the people in the paintings always visited each other, so he was not surprised by strangers. I came from somewhere else and passed by here. I came to look for Hoyle. Maureen found that it seemed impossible to tell whether the person in the painting was a person in the painting or not, which made him feel much more at ease. Hoyle has a bad temper. You'd better not provoke him. He doesn't talk to us much and seems out of tune with us. The wizard reminded. Okay, thank you for reminding me. I will pay attention. Maureen walked around to the back of the house after the wizard who was walking the slug left and took a look at the structure of the house. There was a garden behind the house, but unlike the lively gardens of other people's houses next to it, Hoyle's garden was full of weeds, and it seemed that no one had taken care of it for a long time. Professor Charles just entered this house. Chapter 146 Red House. Maureen carefully opened the garden fence and quietly walked along the weed-covered path towards the back door of the house. The grass here was knee-deep and swaying in the wind, rising and falling, making rustling sounds. He no longer regarded this place as a false world, because every step here made a sound, and he had to act with caution. The back door of the house was locked. Maureen pulled it twice, but the door did not move. He pointed it with his magic wand and whispered, "Allow open." Click. The door opened gently, which surprised Maureen a little. It was really strange that his magic could also work in the painting. He gently pushed the door open. The room was a little dark, and the curtains around seemed to be drawn. There was a strange smell in the air, which was hard to describe. He walked through the back door and came to the kitchen. Coffee was still boiling on the stove in the kitchen, and the coffee pot was still steaming, as if someone had just made coffee. Are the people in the paintings so realistic? Can they even make coffee? Maureen muttered to himself. He walked through the kitchen and came to the stairs. The stairs were made of wood and boards, sprayed with red paint, shining and spotless. Opposite the stairs was the hall, which was decorated extremely elegantly and comfortably. Unlike the kitchen he had just entered, there was plenty of light here. The soft white sofas were placed next to the windows. The sun shone on the sofas, making it comfortable and lazy. There were many easels in the room, and these easels were covered with a layer of gauze, so it was difficult to see what was painted on them. There was a round table in the middle of the house with a piece of parchment on it. A person was sitting at the table. "Good afternoon, Walker." The person at the table spoke. Maureen was slightly startled, and he had already raised his wand. "It's evening now, Professor," Maureen said a little nervously. Sitting next to the table was the gentle Professor Charles. Professor Charles smiled and said, "You have come to the world in the painting. This painting is at noon, so it is noon now." Professor Charles looked at Maureen with interest, and then snapped his fingers. Maureen suddenly heard a sound behind him. He turned around abruptly, thinking that something was going to attack him. When he was about to cast a spell, he saw the coffee pot in the kitchen fly around Maureen and towards Professor Charles. "Would you like some coffee?" Two white porcelain cups appeared on Professor Charles's table, and there was a hand painted on the cups. "I like this kind of cup very much. It is a pleasure to drink coffee with it. Do you want to try it?" Maureen pointed the wand at Professor Charles again and said, "Can the coffee in the painting be drunk?" "You still don't understand, Walker." Professor Charles looked at his cup, and the coffee pot automatically filled the cup. The hand on the cup pinched 2 sugars and a pack of creamer from somewhere and threw them into the coffee in the cup, and the spoon was stirring slowly. He seemed very satisfied with the coffee he made. He picked up the cup and blew gently, then took a sip and said, "You came to the world of painting. The things in the painting are real to you. You should remember this." "I don't understand." Maureen was thinking of countermeasures quickly in his mind. He was not surprised at all that Professor Charles appeared here. After all, he suspected it was him from the beginning, but he didn't understand why Professor Charles wanted to enter the painting. What conspiracy was he brewing? "Oh, of course you don't understand." Professor Charles put down the cup in his hand, then looked up at Maureen. "Not only you don't understand, even I don't understand." "What don't you understand?" Maureen looked at Professor Charles warily, looked around, and continued, "Where are Hugo, Lily and Sweet? There's no need to rush. Why don't you tell me about yourself first, Walker?" Professor Charles' smile was still refreshing, but in Maureen's eyes, this smile had changed. "I don't have much to say. You should know how badly I learned Muggle studies." Maureen still felt uneasy. If they really had to fight, he would not be a match for Professor Charles. However, Professor Charles did not attack him immediately. Obviously, He also had many questions to ask Maureen. Maureen had to get the whole thing clear. Of course, it's one thing to learn Muggle studies poorly. But what I want to know more is why you are the only one who is not affected. Professor Charles said. Affected by what? Maureen frowned. Time, Maureen Walker, time. Everyone must obey the law of time, but you are not affected by time. Several times, you almost ruined my plan. Not affected by time. Yes, that's right. I used the time converter to go back to the past, but you are the only one who knows what is going to happen. I don't understand why. Walker, how did you let yourself know who will disappear? Professor Charles looked at Maureen. He was not in a hurry to attack Maureen. In this place, Maureen was not his opponent. Did you steal the time converter from the Department of Mysteries? Maureen's guess was confirmed. He did not have the ability to control time, but was not affected by the time converter. This explained why Maureen could know what was about to happen. Unfortunately, even Maureen did not know why he was not affected by the time converter. You are very smart, Walker. The people in the Ministry of Magic still don't know where the time converter is. Only you know it. Professor Charles tapped the table lightly with his fingers, and his eyes fell on the parchment on the table. You have been appearing in places where you should not be. If it weren't for this parchment, I wouldn't even be able to save my plan in time. Maureen also focused on the parchment, and then he was slightly stunned. The parchment was the Marauder's map in James's hand. Did you steal the Marauder's map too? Maureen said in surprise. Someone broke into the Gryffindor boys' dormitory, and James lost a lot of things, including the Marauder's map. They initially suspected that it was a student who did it. Now, Maureen knew that it was actually a teacher who stole other magic jokes to prevent people from knowing that his real goal was the Marauder's map. Marauder map? Are you talking about this parchment? Professor Charles ran his finger across the parchment and said, This is indeed a good thing. You always like to run around in the castle and break the rules. This is not what a good student should do. I never thought I was a good student. Maureen said. Maureen finally understood why he couldn't accurately grasp the key to the clue every time. Many times after returning to the past, things that should have happened did not happen as planned. It turned out that it was because Professor Charles had this in his hand and had a clear grasp of Maureen's whereabouts. The latest novels are published on the 6th-9th book bar. But how did you sneak into our Gryffindor dormitory? The fat lady said that no one else entered the Gryffindor common room. If you sneaked in, the fat lady would definitely find out. Maureen asked. You're right. It's hard for a teacher to walk into the students' common room without being discovered. Professor Charles smiled and said, The fat lady created by Godric Gryffindor is conscientious. It's not easy to get into the Gryffindor common room from her, but I still have a way to do it. Believe me, I know this very well. I know what the person in the painting is thinking better than anyone else. Maureen thought of something and exclaimed, Hoyle. The fat lady fell in love with a handsome man in the painting, but later that man abandoned the fat lady. The fat lady took her anger out on the Gryffindor boys and changed the password to Men Are Heartless. This unfaithful man is Hoyle. If you want to lure the fat lady away, you just need to let Hoyle take the fat lady out for a walk. With Professor Charles' ability, he will definitely be able to enter the unattended door and take the opportunity to steal James's Marauder's map. But I thought Hoyle should be. Maureen was a little surprised. He had been wrong all along. He had always thought that Hoyle wanted to tell Maureen about Professor Charles's conspiracy. Oh, it seems that you have indeed investigated this matter very clearly, and you even know the name Hoyle. Professor Charles nodded approvingly. Although you have learned a lot of Muggle knowledge, from the perspective of wizards, you are the best student I have ever seen. You are perfect in magic. Maureen was not happy at all to receive such a high evaluation from Professor Charles. Is Hoyle in the same group with you? Maureen clenched his wand. Hoyle was a good man in the comic book Wizards Tomorrow, but he was an accomplice in this painting. The reason why he was with a fat lady was to help Professor Charles steal the map. Maureen looked around. This house was where Hoyle lived in the painting. Professor Charles was sitting here leisurely drinking coffee, which was very telling. That fat woman is so ugly and lacks taste. If it weren't for this map, would I condescend to be with her? Naive fat lady. A lazy voice came from the stairs. Maureen turned around and saw that the blonde Hoyle had appeared on the stairs at some point. He leaned against the wall, his hands folded across his chest, looking lazy. I should have thought that you helped him steal the Marauder's map. Maureen stared at Hoyle vigilantly. I'm just taking back what belongs to me. This is not stealing, Walker. Professor Charles said. This is not yours, it's James's. Maureen emphasized. This is not the boy from the Potter family. Maybe it's a Hogwarts map made by a wizard, but have you ever thought about why only this parchment can be used to make the Marauder's map? Why can't other parchments do it? Do you know what this parchment means, Walker? Professor Charles said softly. Maureen did hear James say that the Marauder's map cannot be copied because the material of parchment is difficult to get. But this parchment can't be yours. I heard that the Marauder's map was made by James's grandfather and his friends. You are much younger than them. Maureen said. You hit the nail on the head. Professor Charles gently stroked the edge of the Marauder's map, as if he was admiring a rare treasure. You suddenly made me realize that I am not young anymore. Professor Charles laughed again. His smile was very strange and chilling. Chapter 147 The Truth of Time. What does this mean? Maureen didn't like Professor Charles' smile. This smile was completely different from the Professor Charles he usually saw. Usually, Professor Charles' smile made people feel like spring breeze, but the smile of Professor Charles in front of him was a little cold. It doesn't matter, Walker, why don't you answer my question first? Professor Charles turned the teacup with his hand and said, why are you the only one who is not affected by the time converter? Maureen didn't answer, but just stared at Professor Charles. Professor Charles had more initiative with the time converter in his hand. Although Maureen was not affected by the time converter, it was difficult for him to deal with Professor Charles. He had to think of a countermeasure. But Professor Charles didn't care what Maureen was thinking and talked to himself. This is very strange. I didn't pay much attention to it at first. Not long after you started school, I happened to hear the Potter brothers going to deal with Peeves at noon that day, holding my parchment map in their hands. This annoyed me. That was my thing, but it turned into a map for children to play with. Professor Charles sneered. I needed to get my things back, but I couldn't do it myself at that time, so I told Peeves what they were going to do very early, and asked Peeves to get the parchment at all costs. After I made sure that Peeves had played a trick on you, I used the time converter to go back an hour ago and find Mosby from Hufflepuff to attack him. Professor Charles spoke slowly and steadily, as if he had many questions that were not answered. Maureen did not interrupt Professor Charles, because he also needed to know the truth, but he still did not let down his guard. The wand in his hand was ready at any time, and his footsteps slowly moved to a safe position. Professor Charles continued, but when I dealt with Mosby's matter and rushed to that classroom to get back my parchment, I found that you had subdued Peeves. This puzzled me because according to the normal timeline, Peeves should have played a trick on you. So that's how it is. Maureen came to her senses. No wonder when James and Albus were going to play a trick on Peeves, Peeves had anticipated their coming and used the magic canvas to create an illusion and retaliate against them. At that time, they were still wondering why Peeves knew this in advance. Unfortunately, in this incident, the loophole in Professor Charles' plan was Maureen. Although Peeves knew they were coming in advance and was well prepared, after returning to the past, Maureen was not affected. He also knew that Peeves was well prepared and changed the plan in time. I couldn't understand why this matter went wrong. I thought it was just that I accidentally changed the time and made a mistake in a certain link, causing some time events to become disordered. You, who were originally subdued by Peeves, subdued Peeves instead. The magic of time, sometimes only a little change will have a huge impact on the future. This is an accidental event, so I didn't take it seriously at first. Professor Charles looked at Maureen. Later, when I attacked Jamie from Gryffindor, you happened to follow me to this classroom and scared me. I felt strange at the time. Do you know something? Unfortunately, I treated you as an ordinary first-year student and ignored you directly. But when I was dealing with Lily Potter and Sweep Clive, you happened to appear in the corridor on the 7th floor, and I finally realized that something was wrong. Professor Charles' eyes began to become hot when he looked at Maureen. I realized one thing, that's right. You are not affected by the time converter. This is amazing. I have never heard of anyone who is not affected by the time converter. Even people who use the time converter will see another self, but you didn't use the time converter, but you knew something was going to happen. Professor Charles looked at Maureen with a strange look in his eyes. Walker, you make me very curious. I have wanted to attack you for a long time because you are different from others. After thinking it over again and again, I decided to catch you when you go home for Christmas. I know how to break the magic on the train, which is not difficult for me. But unfortunately, The decision on Christmas was a mistake. He did not catch Maureen, but Maureen burned the train of Hogwarts, causing a great sensation. Even Professor Charles could not do anything about Maureen's flames. So it was not Poker who attacked me on the train during the Christmas holiday, but you? Maureen asked. It was him, but it was not him either. This is not the point. The point is that I accidentally discovered another thing. I used the time converter after you left the school by train for a long distance, but this time, you didn't seem to realize it. Professor Charles' tone has become a little excited. He doesn't seem to care whether he caught Maureen or not, but more concerned about what he wants to confirm. Maureen was also slightly surprised. Did Professor Charles use the time converter at that time? He really didn't realize it when he was on the train. Professor Charles laughed. I understand one thing, you are not affected by time, but you are limited by space. As long as you are a certain distance away from the time converter, even if I go back to the past, you will be like everyone else, not understanding what will happen next. Why did you have to use the time converter before you attacked me? Maureen looked around vigilantly. I remember someone used the time converter to go back to the past, and there were two identical people, so where is the other you now? Why not show up at the same time? When a person uses the time converter to go back to the past, there will be two identical selves. Normally, the two selves can act independently, cast magic, and see each other. Professor Charles just used the time converter to go back to the past 24 hours ago, which means that there should be two Professor Charles here now. Professor Charles said meaningfully, I am different from other people. When I use the time converter, it is not as simple as going back to the past, Walker. For me, the time converter will not produce two of me at the same time. This is the same as you to some extent. Maureen's heart moved. Why is that? Do you have the same ability as me? The latest novels are first published on Liujashuba. Of course not, don't you understand? Professor Charles looked at Maureen, like a hungry wolf looking at a little lamb, his eyes full of murderous light. Walker, I just don't have your ability, so I am interested in you. Because compared to taking away other people's time, I care more about how to take away your time. Take away my time. Maureen frowned. Chapter 148 The Truth of Time. The sun shone lazily in from the window, and people in the paintings could be seen coming and going on the street, greeting each other, creating a harmonious scene. But the atmosphere in the small house seemed very dull. Do you know what the nature of prophecy is? Walker, do you understand what prophecy is? Professor Charles did not answer Maureen immediately. A sickly blush appeared on his face, and his whole face looked very distorted. The nature of prophecy. Maureen did not understand why Professor Charles suddenly mentioned the prophecy. Last time, Professor Trelawney made an unclear prophecy in front of him, but he still did not understand what the prophecy meant. Professor Charles said with a tisk-tisk sound, prophecy is to use magic to see through what will happen in the future. Having a time converter allows you to go back to the past at will. To a certain extent, it is the control of true prophecy. Because you know what will happen next, you can change the future. Professor Charles looked at Maureen. Everyone will be affected by time and will be changed, but you are the only exception. You are like a person whose fate cannot be predicted. Those prophecies and time magic can't work around you. I noticed one thing on the list stolen from the Department of Mysteries. There is no prophecy record of your birth. Someone recorded it manually. Yes, I figured it out. No one can make a prophecy about you because those magics are useless to you. You have something hidden in you that I have always dreamed of. Maureen was also surprised when he heard this. He then remembered what his grandfather told him. The name of the Department of Mysteries was omitted when he was born, and it was his grandfather who added it. So this is what he meant. So, this is why I was confused when I looked at the star chart in astronomy. Maureen thought thoughtfully. Astronomy predicts the future according to the position of the planets. If he cannot be predicted, then the confusion in his eyes can be explained. It is he who makes the prediction magic of the planets ineffective. Professor Charles' eyes became more and more fiery. Think about it. If I get your ability, I can control everything. I have a time converter, and I will know anything that is about to happen. Others cannot predict me. They can't predict what I will do next, and no one can do anything to me, so I have been waiting for you to come, Walker. Wait for you to come here and take away your time. Professor Charles looked very excited. He knocked over the cup of coffee on the table, and the coffee spilled all over the table, but he didn't realize it and still stared at Maureen. Maureen took a step back, forced himself to calm down, and said, "Then I'm afraid you will be disappointed. If I am not affected by the time converter, and you are so close to me now, how can you take away my time?" Although he still didn't understand what Professor Charles meant by taking away time, he thought it would definitely not be a pleasant experience. However, Professor Charles hasn't taken action against him yet, so he must be afraid of something. Professor Charles showed a weird smile. "Have you forgotten what I said just now? Walker, you have come to the world of painting. The things in the painting are real to you, and the space in the painting is also real to you. The rules in the painting are different from the outside world. I know how to control the space magic in the painting, but you don't understand, so I have already thought of how to deal with you." A magic wand appeared in Professor Charles' hand, pointing at Maureen. "Now, what I want to know is, what secrets do you have? Walker, come on, tell me what you know. I don't want to blindly take away your time, because there was such a strange flame on you last time. What if there is a risk of destroying myself? I have to figure it out first. I have told you what you want to know. Now it's your turn to honestly tell you what you want to know, so that you can suffer less pain." Maureen has already told Professor Charles with his actions. The flames are raging. His wand had already emitted a red light, and billowing flames gushed out from his wand, rushing towards Professor Charles. At the same time, his hand reached into his pocket. The only thing that could deal with Professor Charles now was the dragon flame antifreeze that Arnold gave him. If his flames could make Professor Charles helpless last time, then it could be done now. But his hand touched nothing. The dragon flame antifreeze was not in his pocket. How is this possible? Maureen was surprised. He remembered that he always carried this bottle of potion with him and never left it. But he only touched the boy who was sleeping in his pocket. "Are you looking for this, Walker?" Professor Charles just waved his wand, and all the flames that Maureen summoned disappeared. In his hand, a carnation like gold appeared. The petals of the carnation bloomed, and the bottle of dragon flame antifreeze was in the middle of the petals. That little girl. Maureen's heart sank. He had just put this carnation in his pocket. Who would have thought that this was Professor Charles' magic, quietly taking away his dragon flame antifreeze? "Yes, everyone in this painting is untrustworthy to you, Walker. I arranged that little girl, too. I attacked you twice at different times on the train. I already knew how you cast that kind of fire. Do you think I would let you wander around my territory with restless fire?" Professor Charles narrowed his eyes. His cold eyes were completely different from the gentle professor in the past, and then the bottle of dragon flame cold repellent shattered and turned into ash. "Do I still have to do it myself? I'm sorry, I thought you would cooperate." Professor Charles' wand suddenly shot out a blue light, coming towards Maureen. Maureen immediately squatted down. The spell brushed his hairline, and at the same time his wand also emitted a white light, petrify all. The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. "It's useless, Walker, your magic is useless to me, you are just a freshman." Professor Charles easily dissolved Maureen's petrification spell, ice breathless. The gray light turned into a sky full of wind and snow and covered Maureen. When Maureen was about to dodge again, two hands of condensed frost suddenly stretched out from the floor and grabbed his feet tightly, making him unable to move. Damn it! Maureen was unable to dodge. This time he didn't even have time to cast the flame, and the wind and snow had already arrived in front of him. But at this moment, there was a loud noise, and a huge explosion came from the hall at the front door of the house. The door had been blown to pieces. A person stepped in from the door, and a green light blocked Maureen's eyes, blocking all the wind and snow. Unforgivable. A serious and low voice came. How could it be? Maureen was shocked to see the person who suddenly appeared here to save him. Chapter 149 Unexpected Person. Professor Charles. Maureen looked at the man in front of him in doubt, and then looked at the person standing next to the table. There were two identical Professor Charles in this room. "Molin, you shouldn't come to this place." Professor Charles, who had just broken into the room, strode to Maureen and protected Maureen behind him. His expression was extremely serious. Maureen looked at him with some vigilance. "Who are you?" "I'm a real person." "Prove it." "Now?" "Maureen." Professor Charles turned his head and asked, "Do you think now is a good time to prove my identity?" But Maureen took a step back and did not relax. "I don't believe the person in this painting. He had to do this." In this painting, there were two Professor Charles. One of them wanted to take his time, and although this one seemed to be here to protect him, What if it was someone deliberately created by the other party to make Maureen relax his vigilance and then get his secrets? Maureen didn't have the dragon flame cold repellent now, so he couldn't trust anyone easily. Yes, you shouldn't trust me, and you can't trust anyone in this painting. Professor Charles in front of Maureen nodded seriously. You should leave this place quickly. When I deal with this guy, I will find a way to take you away from here. Deal with me? Ha ha ha. Charles, what gives you the courage to make you think you can deal with me alone? Professor Charles standing next to the table said. Why don't you use your true face? Is it fun to walk around the castle in my appearance? Hoyle, or should I call you Professor Charles? In front of Maureen's eyes were sharp, pinged. Sure enough. Maureen's doubts were confirmed. After he came to this painting, heard the other party say some weird words, and saw Hoyle, he vaguely guessed the identity of this Charles in his heart, but because Ping was a figure from hundreds of years ago, he was not sure. I should have thought of it earlier. Maureen said, but he shouldn't. Shouldn't he have died a long time ago? Tisk tisk. Many people thought I was dead. Professor Charles, who was standing by the table, suddenly began to become unreal and distorted. A ray of light appeared on his body, and he soon transformed into a middle-aged man with silver hair, deep eyebrows and sharp edges. This is actually Professor Charles in disguise. How did you find out, Charles? I thought I was hiding it very well. Pying Aid smiled very coldly, and the muscle lines on his face were intertwined and twisted, filled with a sense of hostility. It's your own fault. You actually spied on my students in front of me, Pying Aid. This is a school. Can you hide what you want to do from others? The real Professor Charles looked at Pying Aid and said calmly. Maureen suddenly realized that he seemed to have wronged Professor Charles. It turned out that the Professor Charles that Sir Cadogan saw was disguised by Pying Aid. No wonder Sir Cadogan said that Professor Charles who attacked him was stained with the blood of the person in the painting, that is, the paint for painting. Because Professor Charles, disguised as Ping, is the person in the painting. Yes, yes. Ping nodded approvingly, except for me. You are the one who knows the most about painting in the whole school. What's the matter? Ping has been dead for hundreds of years, hasn't he? Maureen asked. Ping looked over Professor Charles' shoulder, looked at Maureen, and laughed. You always like to remind me that I'm not young anymore, Walker, but it doesn't matter. By taking away your time, I can live again. He's not dead, Maureen. He used a vicious magic to live in the painting. Do you remember how I introduced his paintings to you? Professor Charles said in a deep voice. The Muggles he painted won't move. He hopes that Muggles and wizards can live in peace. Maureen frowned. Those are not painted Muggles, Maureen. Professor Charles' voice was filled with anger. Those are real Muggles. What do you mean? He used magic to seal the Muggles in his paintings, just like we are now, and then he killed those Muggles, and used the lives of the Muggles to gain eternal life. Professor Charles' voice was faintly mixed with anger. Everyone says that his paintings are to express the theme of harmonious coexistence of Muggles and wizards. That is just his means of deceiving others. Only in this way, people will not suspect him of the missing Muggles. Those motionless ones outside, Maureen was shocked. Are they real Muggles? Pangard clapped his hands lightly and exclaimed, Great, Charles, how did you find out? No one has ever discovered my secret. You were the first one hundreds of years ago. Just now, you shouldn't have let me into this painting, Pinged. Those Muggles outside were cast with strange magic. Their bodies haven't decayed yet, but their lives have merged with this painting, being used by you and flowing through you. Professor Charles said, If you knew that I have studied painting, you should understand that I can see all this. Professor Charles' words shocked Maureen. Magic can actually be used in this way. Ping looked at Professor Charles with some surprise. Yes, I did underestimate you. It might be a mistake to let you in. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba. Ping was still laughing triumphantly. His laughter was very sharp, but maybe it's not a mistake? I've been trapped in the painting for so long, waiting for the opportunity. You think you can stop me? Huh? Charles, just you. Maybe I can't, but I have sealed all the paintings in the castle with black gentian bile. Ping, you have no chance to leave the painting. Professor Charles said. Ping was not in a hurry at all. He seemed to have expected all this, nodded approvingly. Use black gentian bile to deal with me, Charles. You are the most talented wizard in painting I have ever seen. But this is not enough. I anticipated all this. I have a time converter, and I know how to deal with it. Pyong walked around the room, and Maureen thought of the paintings he saw in the North Tower. His heart sank, realizing that Pyong might know that Professor Charles would use black gentian bile, so he moved some paintings to the North Tower. He was afraid that Professor Charles might have missed the paintings in the North Tower. I admire you, Charles. Why don't you pledge your allegiance to me? I will let you experience what real art is. Art created by a brush lacks real life. Only art created with life can bloom with vitality. Charles, you and I are both painters. Why don't you understand this truth? Pyong said. The artists standing at the top are indeed a group of lunatics, and they all have more or less quirks. Maureen couldn't help thinking. I am a painter, but I won't use the lives of muggles to paint. Pyong, you make me feel sick. Professor Charles said with disgust. It was the first time that Maureen saw Professor Charles' face showing such an expression of disgust for someone. In the past, Professor Charles was always gentle to others and would not scold people. How did you leave the painting? Professor Charles asked again. Why? You have been tracking me for so long, but you didn't figure out this matter. Pyong looked at Professor Charles and Maureen jokingly. Time converter. Maureen said aloud. He thought of what Painjit had been saying all along, taking away time, and vaguely guessed some truth in his heart. There is only one possibility. For those 7 missing classmates, he must have used the time converter to cast some kind of magic. Those people didn't know where they went in an hour. I don't think they have lost their memory, but their 1 hour was taken away, allowing this guy to temporarily leave the painting. When Maureen saw the marks on the backs of Hugo and others and wanted to peek into their memories always came to an abrupt end in the fog. He always thought that Hugo and others had their memories erased, but in fact, they were not. An hour was taken away from them for no reason, and they lost an hour of life. Chapter 150 The Cautious Painter. 7 missing classmates? What does this mean? Professor Charles was puzzled. 7 people missing? I always thought it was only Poke. Haha. Only 1 person? Charles, you are worse than your students. Walker knows about the time converter, but you still come here without knowing anything. Pyong laughed. After a while, Pyong said as if praising himself, I am very cautious, Walker. In order not to attract other people's attention, every time I take action against a student who meets the requirements, I try to be quick and not let them disappear for too long, otherwise the professors will be suspicious. I handled it very well, and no one realized what I did to the students. I was so cautious that I could hide it from all the professors in the school, but I couldn't hide it from you. Walker, you really surprised and delighted me. Pyong was able to complete his conspiracy and live quietly until now because he acted very carefully. When he was alive in the real world, he created an illusion for the world that he was a peaceful wizard who wanted muggles and wizards to coexist. After his death, the world didn't know what cruel things he had done to muggles, and they sang praises for him, spread his paintings everywhere, and remembered him in books. When he took action against students in school, he only made the students disappear for 1 night or 1 day. Such a short period of time is difficult to attract attention in a wizard school where students violate school rules every day. After all, students who study magic will not stay still. It is normal for them to sneak out of school or be cast a stunning spell or sleeping spell by someone, or lie in a broom closet toilet for a day. Professors will not think too much about a freshman missing for a day. The wizard world is different from the muggle world. But you are still not careful enough, Pyong. Maureen said angrily, you let Poke disappear for too long, which attracted everyone's attention. Why did you catch him for so long? Poke is different from other first-year students. He is a 6th-year student. After he went back, he still had some memories. I had to catch him back. Pyong said. Maureen remembered the mark on the notebook. No wonder Poke drew an eye and a pen mark there. It turned out that he remembered some things. Pyong's eyes flashed with eagerness, but Poke is secondary. My real target is you. Maureen Walker, as long as you can appear in front of me, it doesn't matter even if other people know I'm still alive. I have been living on the lives of muggles in my paintings, but the lives of muggles will also be exhausted. When the lives of these muggles are exhausted, my life will be over. For hundreds of years, I have been trying to catch muggles into my paintings and let them die for me, but leaving the paintings requires a lot of lives, which is not a long-term solution for me. You killed all muggles. Maureen frowned. You are really capable to attack a group of people who don't understand magic. He had never heard of this kind of evil magic before. The souls of wizards are magical. If any wizard turns into a ghost and stays here, and makes my secret known to the world, then my paintings that are circulated around the world will be in danger. Payengard grinned, the muscles on his face twitching. I won't attack wizards, not even squibs. I must be careful, Walker. He thought of the hundreds of years of lingering life, and a trace of hatred appeared in his eyes. Obviously, he gained eternal life by plundering the lives of Muggles, but he also trapped himself in the paintings. This kind of eternal life is not what he wants. What I want most is a time turner, but I never had the chance because I couldn't go to the Department of Mysteries in person, not to mention that Potter destroyed all the time turners in order to eliminate Voldemort for more than 20 years. Penguin was very angry when he said this, but then he laughed, until I met Pretty, a wizard who was not very smart but had a talent for painting. He overheard from the Minister of the Department of Mysteries, Mithras, that there was still a remaining time turner in the Ministry of Magic, and he planned to steal it to make money. I saw the opportunity, instigated him, and helped him direct all the way. Yes, if it weren't for my help, how could he break into the Department of Mysteries? Dream on. Maureen probably knew what would happen next. Pretty must have taken Penguin's paintings to the Department of Mysteries. Along the way, Penguin, who had lived for hundreds of years, taught Pretty how to deal with the horrors of the Ministry of Magic. With Penguin's ability, it was not difficult to do this. After he succeeded, Pretty was abandoned by Penguin, and he took the time turner and escaped. I finally got the time converter I dreamed of, but the immortality magic I invented is still short of 6 sacrifices. I must find wizards who meet the conditions and have painting talents. Where are there the most wizards? That's right, Hogwarts. Here I can definitely find sacrifices that meet the requirements of rebirth magic. I destroyed the painting in Pre's hand and came to Hogwarts. This is not difficult for me, because my masterpiece is hanging in Hogwarts, and I can get here in just a blink of an eye. It's not easy to do things in school, but I finally got together 6 people born in double months. Pyong laughed strangely, spreading his hands as if embracing victory, but Professor Charles had already seized the opportunity. Wind and thunder sound. Professor Charles had been waiting. He knew that he could not be the opponent of a wizard who had lived for hundreds of years, so he had to strike first. His wand fired a blue arc at Pyong, and the arc rotated, bringing a sharp cry and a thunderwind. The spell almost hit Pyong directly. Not only Professor Charles, but Maureen also cast a flaming spell on Pyong at almost the same time. The fire line whistled from the top of Professor Charles' shoulder and went towards Pyong. They both had the same idea. They had to take Pyong by surprise. There was no principle at this time. The existence of Pyong hundreds of years ago was unprincipled for them. But the spell passed through Pyong's body. How could it be? Professor Charles and Maureen were both surprised. You two are too impatient. Don't you wait until you finish reading the 6 sacrifices of my rebirth. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Pyong looked fine. Whether it was Professor Charles or Maureen, their spells were useless to Pyong, and did not hurt Pyong at all. You will appreciate my masterpiece. Yes, these 6 sacrifices are all people with painting talents, but their painting talents have not been specially explored. It is such a waste. Pyong snapped his fingers, and the 6 easels standing on the ground in the room shook slightly. The veils covering them had floated away, revealing the paintings on the easels. Both Maureen and Professor Charles were slightly startled and found it incredible. Among the canvases on the easels, there were 6 people including Hugo and Lily. You two are very lucky. I allow you to witness my rebirth with your own eyes, the great magic I created, and the powerful magic I figured out, Dark Awakening. Pyong's laughter spread throughout the house. A bolt of lightning struck from the sky outside, and the outside world was already covered with dark clouds without knowing when. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.